2 seconds. That's all it took for the chief surgeon to rip a nurse off her feet by her hair in a packed ER, and every single person in that room just watched. Coffee cups froze mid-air. A little boy with a bleeding forehead started to cry. Behind the glass, a man in a black suit didn't flinch. He tilted his head, almost curious, like he just decided who wouldn't survive the week. The nurse's knees hit the tile. Blood from her lips smeared across a clipboard. She lifted her eyes, calm, empty, wrong, and smiled. Before we go any further, I want to ask you one small favor. Stay with me all the way to the end of this story, because what that quiet nurse does in the final 20 minutes is something you will not see coming. If you're enjoying this, hit that like button and drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments. I genuinely love seeing how far these stories travel, and I read every single one. Now, let's get into it. Rain hadn't let up over Beacon Harbor in 3 days. The kind of gray, steady rain that made the Atlantic look like wet concrete and turned every sidewalk into a mirror of headlights and neon. St. Adelaide Mercy sat on the north edge of the city, a 12-story slab of limestone and glass pressed up against the harbor, its emergency bay glowing fluorescent white through the downpour. It was the busiest Level 1 trauma center in the state, and on a Thursday night in early November, it felt like every ambulance within 60 miles was trying to squeeze through its doors at once. Claire Whitmore clocked in at 6:52 p.m. She was 34, 5'8", with hair the color of wheat pulled back in a low bun she hadn't bothered to tighten in 6 hours. Her eyes were a pale, almost washed-out blue, the kind that made people underestimate her in grocery store lines and occasionally in trauma bays. She walked the same way she always walked, no rush, no drag, and she said good evening to the security guard at the side entrance by name. Miguel, 2 kids. Older one played Little League. Rough one already, Miguel said, not looking up from his monitor. When isn't it? Hail's on. She paused for half a beat, one hand on the badge reader. Copy that. Miguel finally looked up. His eyes said what his mouth wouldn't. Be careful tonight. She gave him a small, tight smile and kept walking. The ER at St. Adelaide that night was a controlled riot. 22 beds, every one of them full, 4 gurneys lining the hallway, a toddler screaming somewhere near triage, and the constant 2-tone chirp of the overhead paging system that Claire had stopped hearing consciously about 2 years into the job. The charge nurse, Renata Ortiz, spotted her and practically threw the tablet at her chest. Please tell me you're on tonight for real, not another half shift. Full 12. I love you. I will have your children. You already have 3, Ren. I'll have yours too. Claire smiled for real this time, just a flash of it, and took the hand off. Bay 7, chest pain, stable. Bay 12, compound fracture, waiting on ortho. Bay 4, possible overdose, watching for respiratory. Bay 19, a 12-year-old with a dog bite to the face whose mother had been crying in the hallway for 40 minutes and needed someone to sit with her for 2 goddamn minutes. Claire went to Bay 19 first. That was the thing about her, and it was the thing people never quite knew how to describe if they tried to tell someone about Claire Whitmore later. She prioritized wrong, or she prioritized right, depending on how you looked at it. 1,000 charts in front of her, and she'd go to the one where the kid was shaking. She sat on the rolling stool next to the little boy. Marcus, his chart said, though she asked him his name anyway so he'd hear himself say it out loud. And she let his mother grip her wrist hard enough to leave marks while Claire cleaned the bite with saline and talked about absolutely nothing. What school? What grade? What was his dog's name? The boy was crying so hard he was hiccuping. Buddy, she said, I'm going to put a little numbing stuff on here. Counts of 3. 1. She did it on 1. She never counted to 3. Kids braced on 3. She'd learned that in a town outside Kandahar, on a kid about the same age, and she'd carried the lesson home like a stone in her pocket. She was halfway through the first suture when the doors of Bay 19 crashed open and Dr. Victor Hale filled the frame. Hale was 6'2", built like a man who'd rowed in college and still talked about it. Salt and pepper hair, jaw like a magazine ad, a wedding ring he liked to drum against clipboards when he was annoyed. 51 years old and the current head of the surgical department, which at St. Adelaide meant he could more or less do whatever he wanted and had been doing it for 17 years. Whitmore. Dr. Hale. She didn't look up. Her hands kept moving. I've been paging. I'm suturing. I need you in OR2. OR2 has Garza. OR2 has whoever I say OR2 has. Finish up and move. She tied off the suture with one smooth pull. I'll be there in 6 minutes. You'll be there in 3. He was gone before she could answer. The boy's mother was staring at the door like a raccoon had just walked through it. He's, the mother said. Is he always? Yes, Claire said. Breathe, Marcus. One more, okay? You're doing great. OR2 wasn't even OR2. Not really. Hale wanted her in the observation bay off the second trauma suite, where a patient had come in from a rollover on I-73 and was currently occupying the time of 3 surgeons, 2 anesthesiologists, and a resident named Kyle, who had been crying in the supply closet at least twice this week. Claire slipped into the scrub area, washed in, gowned up. The second her hands were in gloves, Hale started talking, not to her but about her, which was a thing he did, finally. The whole department runs on my time, not on hers. Maybe if the board ever bothered to discipline the nursing floor like they discipline physicians, we wouldn't be— Pressure's dropping, said the anesthesiologist, cool and flat. I can read a monitor, thank you. Claire took her position at the patient's left. 40-something male, seatbelt bruise cutting a diagonal across his chest, abdomen distended, O-negative hanging. She registered all of it in about 2 seconds and moved on instinct, anticipating Hale's next 3 motions and having the instrument in the air before he reached. For 26 minutes, nobody spoke except to call out numbers. Claire worked the way she always worked in a room like that. Quiet, fast, nearly invisible. She handed instruments a half beat before Hale asked. She adjusted suction without being told. She caught a bleeder he hadn't seen yet and pointed with her pinky. There. I see it. He hadn't. He did now. They closed at 7:48. The patient went to ICU alive, which, given where he'd been 40 minutes earlier, was a small miracle nobody in the room would comment on. Claire stripped gown, stripped gloves, washed her hands to the elbow, and was halfway out the door when Hale said her name. Whitmore. She stopped. He let the silence sit a second longer than was necessary. You corrected me. I pointed. In front of a resident. Kyle was at the foot of the table. He couldn't see it either. Don't ever do that again. She turned, looked him in the eye. Okay. Okay. Okay, Dr. Hale? He stared at her for a long beat, searching for the disrespect he could feel was there and couldn't quite locate. Then he smiled. The smile, the one everyone at St. Adelaide knew, the one that had made 2 nurses quit and 1 transfer to pediatrics. Get back on the floor. She got back on the floor. Bam. It was 9:14 p.m. when it happened. Claire was at the central station charting Bay 7 when a call came in from triage. Chest pain. 68-year-old female, pale and diaphoretic, daughter driving her from the car. Claire called out a bay, grabbed a wheelchair, and was at the ambulance entrance when the daughter came through the automatic doors half carrying her mother. The woman's lips were the color of a bruise. My in progress, Claire said into her shoulder radio, already moving. Bay 3, now, get me a 12 lead and cath lab on standby. She got the woman onto the gurney. She got the leads on. She got the line in on the first stick, which on a 70-kilo woman in active infarct was not nothing. She was reading the strip, clear ST elevation, inferior wall, when Hale came through the curtain and stopped at the foot of the bed. Who ordered that line? Protocol, Dr. Hale. STEMI. I didn't order it. You weren't here. Excuse me? Claire looked up. It would be important later that she was looking directly at him when it started, because the security camera above the nurse's station had a clean angle on both of their faces, and the coroner's office would eventually pull that footage. The patient is having a heart attack, Claire said. I followed STEMI protocol. I need you to call the cath lab. I need you, Hale said, very quietly, to remember who you are talking to. The patient groaned. The daughter was crying. The monitor was screaming in a rhythm Claire didn't like at all. Dr. Hale! He crossed the bay in 2 strides and grabbed the front of her scrubs. It happened so fast that half the people in the room didn't register what had happened until a second after it had. He didn't hit her. He didn't shove her. What he did was, he balled his fist in the neckline of her scrub top and pulled, hard enough to jerk her forward and halfway off balance. And in the motion, his other hand came up and caught her by the hair at the nape of her neck, the low bun coming apart in his fingers. For 2 full seconds, he had a woman by the scalp in the middle of the emergency room. Everything in the ER stopped. An IV pump kept beeping. Someone said, "Oh my God," soft, like a breath let out. Renata, at the central station, stood up so fast her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. Claire didn't move. She didn't twist. She didn't pull. She didn't raise her hands. Her body just stopped, the way a body stops when it has been trained not to give a predator a reaction. She looked up at Victor Hale with those pale, washed-out eyes and said absolutely nothing, and for a moment, if you had been watching through the glass of the second-floor observation walkway, you might have thought she looked almost relieved, like something she'd been expecting for a long time had finally arrived. Behind the glass on the second floor, a man in a black suit was watching. He was maybe 45, dark hair close-cropped, and going silver at the temples. The kind of suit that cost more than a month of Claire's salary and fit him like it had been grown on his body. He wasn't a visitor. He wasn't a doctor. He was standing alone on the administrative walkway, and he had a phone in his hand, held about chest high, the lens pointed down. He did not flinch. He did not move to intervene. He tilted his head, almost imperceptibly, and his thumb pressed once against the screen. Then he turned and walked away. But let her go. It was Renata. She'd come around the desk. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was a voice you didn't argue with, which was interesting because Hale argued with everyone. He blinked, looked at his own hand like he was surprised to find it where it was, and let go. Claire staggered a half step. She didn't fall. She didn't touch her head. She straightened the neckline of her scrubs. And then, while the entire bay watched, she turned back to the patient, bent over the monitor and said, "Get me cath lab on the phone. Now." "Whitmore," Hale started. "The patient is coding in 90 seconds if we don't move her." Claire's voice was not angry. It was not shaking. It was the flattest thing in the room. "Call it, or I will. And then we can talk about what just happened." He looked at her. He looked at the bay. He looked at 22 faces looking back at him. His jaw worked. "Call it," he said to the resident behind him, and walked out. The woman lived. They got her to cath lab at 9:22, 90% occlusion of the right coronary. A 20-minute delay and she would have been a case study. Claire stayed with the daughter until the transport team came, held her hand while she cried, and then she walked into the break room, locked the door, and sat on the floor with her back against the vending machine for 4 minutes. Then she got up, washed her face, and went back out. She would find out later that during those 4 minutes, Victor Hale had walked into the administrative office upstairs and begun the process of filing a formal complaint against her. The email came at 6:04 a.m. Claire was home by then in the small 2-bedroom walk-up on Fern Street she'd bought with her separation pay 3 years ago. The cat, Dennis, was sitting on her chest and kneading. She'd been staring at the ceiling for an hour. The email was from HR. It was 3 paragraphs. The phrase administrative leave pending investigation appeared twice. The phrase assault on a physician appeared once. She read it 4 times. Then she got up, made a coffee, fed Dennis, and sat at her kitchen table looking at the pale rectangle of morning sun on the linoleum. Her phone buzzed. "Renata, did you see?" "Yes." "Claire, they are going to try to bury you. I have witnesses. I have Marcus's mother. I have Kyle from the OR. I have me. Don't sign anything. Don't lose your job, Ren." "Too late, I already told HR to eat glass. Don't sign anything." Claire put the phone face down. At 9:47 a.m., her doorbell rang. 2 men in department store suits stood on her stoop, one of them holding a leather portfolio. They were from the hospital's outside counsel. They were very polite. They came in, sat at her kitchen table, declined coffee, and slid the portfolio across the linoleum. "Miss Whitmore," the older one said, "we think everyone involved would prefer to avoid a protracted process." Claire looked at him. "There are, as I'm sure you're aware, some complexities in the timeline from last night. The security footage there are angles. There are interpretations. Dr. Hale has a long history with this institution. We'd like to offer a resolution, severance, a neutral reference, a non-disclosure, of course." He slid the page out of the portfolio. Claire looked at the number at the bottom. It was enough money that she would not have to work for 4 years. She felt her pulse slow. Not speed up, slow. The way it always slowed when something real was in front of her. "Is this your opening number?" she said. The younger lawyer made a small noise in his throat. The older one didn't blink. "It's a strong number. Because if it's your opening number, I'd like you to leave and come back with the real one." "Ms. Whitmore, I'd like you to leave." They left. The older one paused at the door and said, "Take the weekend. Think about it. Numbers like this don't sit on the table forever." She closed the door behind them, leaned against it. Dennis wound between her ankles. She slid down the door, sat on the entryway rug, and picked him up. And for the first time since the night before, she let herself breathe all the way out. She almost took it. She would admit that later to exactly one person. She almost took it. She had a brother in Oregon who was sick. She had a mortgage. She had a Toyota that was about to need a transmission. She had the quiet, reasonable voice in the back of her head that said, "Walk away. You've walked away from worse. You're 34 years old, and you deserve to not fight anymore." She almost signed. Then her phone rang from a number she didn't recognize. She let it ring twice, picked up on the third. "Hello? Claire Whitmore?" It was a man's voice. Low, careful, not local. There was something in the vowels, something East Coast, but scrubbed. "Who is this?" "I have the unedited footage. All 4 cameras, Bay 3, Central Station, the corridor, and the second-floor walkway. They are preparing to hand over a cut. The cut will not help you." Silence. "How did you get this number?" "The same way I got the footage." A pause. "Ms. Whitmore, I'm going to ask you one question. I need you to answer honestly. Are you going to sign their paper?" She looked at the portfolio still sitting on her kitchen table. "I hadn't decided." "Decide now." "Who are you?" "Someone who was in the building last night, on the second floor." Her stomach dropped 6 inches. "The walkway?" "Yes." "The man in the black suit?" "Yes." "What do you want?" "I want you to not sign their paper." "Why?" "Because they are not just going to fire you, Ms. Whitmore. They are going to make sure you never work in medicine again. And I don't think that is an outcome the country can afford right now. Not with your record." Her hand tightened on the phone. "You know my record. I know your record." He said it quietly. "Staff Sergeant." Nobody had called her that in 4 years. Nobody at St. Adelaide knew, not even HR. She'd put prior military medic on her application and left it at that, because the details of what she'd done in the 18 months between Helmand and coming home were classified at a level most people at the hospital couldn't have read on a good day. "Who are you?" "My name is Isaac Marsh. I'm going to send a courier to your apartment in 90 minutes. He'll have a phone. Use only that phone. Do not sign anything the hospital sends you. Do not speak to their counsel again. Do not leave your apartment tonight. Am I clear?" "You're asking a lot from a phone call." "I'm not asking, Ms. Whitmore. I'm telling you what's about to happen to you if you don't listen." He paused. "There's a reason I was on that walkway last night. There's a reason I was recording. You are not the first person he's done this to, and you are not the only thing being investigated in that building." The line was quiet for a moment. "Did you hear me?" "I heard you." "Good." He hung up. Claire sat on her kitchen floor for a long time. The coffee got cold. Dennis fell asleep in her lap. At some point, she realized her hands were shaking, not hard, but a fine, low tremor, the kind she hadn't felt since the second tour. She watched her own hand on the phone like it belonged to somebody else. At 11:18 a.m., a courier came to her door. She didn't get to use the phone. At 11:46, 3 minutes after the courier left, and 1 minute after Claire had powered the new device on and set it beside Dennis on the counter, every television in Beacon Harbor that was tuned to local news cut into its noon broadcast with a red chyron and a helicopter shot of a freeway. Breaking. Military convoy involved in multi-vehicle accident on I-73 North. Casualties reported. Claire stared at the muted screen over her stove. The helicopter shot pulled back. She counted vehicles. She counted overturned trucks. She saw what she was looking at. The new phone buzzed on the counter. One message from a contact labeled IM. "You were not supposed to be involved tonight." "I'm sorry. They're about to route everything to St. Adelaide. You're the nearest level 1. Your suspension has not processed in the state registry yet. If you walk in that door in the next 30 minutes, they legally cannot stop you from working." She read it twice. A second message. Claire, they need you. She closed her eyes. She thought about the portfolio on the kitchen table. She thought about her brother in Oregon. She thought about the kid in Kandahar who she'd counted to one on. She thought about Marcus with the dog bite, and Renata standing up so fast her chair hit the wall, and Victor Hale's hand in her hair, and the pale rectangle of morning sun on the linoleum that had almost been enough to make her sign. She opened her eyes. She put on a jacket. She drove to the hospital. Boy! She hit the ambulance bay at 12:09 p.m. The rain had turned sideways. There were already 3 ambulances unloading, a 4th coming up the ramp, and the distant, ugly thump of a medevac coming in on the roof. The ER doors slid open and the smell hit her. Blood, diesel, wet wool, and the particular hot copper iron of mass casualty that she had smelled in 3 countries and now apparently in her own. Renata saw her first. Her face did something complicated. Claire, you can't be... Am I suspended in the state registry? What? Am I suspended in the state registry? Renata's eyes flicked to her tablet, flicked back. Not yet. Paperwork still. Then I'm working. Claire was already moving, already pulling a gown from the wall dispenser, already tying her hair back with the elastic from her wrist, already scanning the bay. It was bad. There were 12 gurneys in a space built for 6. There was a young man on the floor because there were no gurneys. There was blood on the ceiling above Bay 4, which Claire clocked in a way civilians didn't clock things, and filed for later. 2 ER physicians were trying to run 2 traumas each and failing. A nurse was holding pressure on a femoral bleed with her entire body weight and losing. Somewhere a soldier was screaming about his legs, and somewhere else a soldier was not making any sound at all, which was worse. Hale was in the middle of the bay. He saw her. His mouth opened. Claire walked past him like he was furniture. She went to the kid on the floor first. 19, maybe 20. Marine hair, pressure bandage on the neck that was already soaked through. She dropped to one knee. She checked his airway. She got 2 fingers into the wound, found the carotid, and clamped it with her hand while she shouted, without looking up, I need a Kelly clamp gauze and a trauma pack at my 3 o'clock. I need somebody on this man's legs. You... She pointed at a resident frozen 3 feet away. You're on airway. Now. Who is she? The resident stammered. She's with me, said Renata, already moving. I need clamps, Claire said again louder. Now. Someone put them in her hand. She didn't look to see who. For the next 11 minutes, Claire Whitmore did something that several people in that bay would later describe, separately and without coordinating, as impossible. She ran 2 bays at once. She triaged 8 soldiers by walking past them and calling out colors. She put pressure on a chest wound with her knee while suturing a scalp with her hands. She rerouted a medevac while reducing a shoulder. When the young Marine's pressure dropped at minute 7, she cracked an intraosseous line into his sternum with a driver the Army stopped issuing in 2019 because she'd learned on the old one, and muscle memory was muscle memory. At minute 8, a corporal, a real one, in uniform, blood on his sleeve, escorting his wounded squad, stopped dead in the middle of the bay and stared at her. Ma'am? He didn't move. Ma'am, that's a combat sternal IO. Yeah. Ma'am, how do you bet? Hold his legs, Corporal. I don't have time. Yes, ma'am. He held the legs. He did not take his eyes off her face. At minute 10, Hale tried to step in. He put his hand on Claire's shoulder. Whitmore, you are suspended. You cannot be in this... Claire did not look up from the sternum she was compressing. Dr. Hale, I will break your wrist if you touch me again. She said it the way she'd said Buddy, counts of 3 to Marcus the night before. Completely level. Completely calm. Step back. He stepped back. At minute 11, a second set of ambulance doors slammed open at the far end of the bay. Cold air. Rain. Boots on tile. 4 men in military fatigues, tactical. 2 in dress uniform. A colonel at the front, gray at the temples. A rack of ribbons on his chest that Claire's eyes, out of 4 years of habit, read in a single sweep, and whose reading made her hands go very still for 1/2 second on the Marine's sternum before resuming. The colonel scanned the bay. His eyes passed over Hale. His eyes passed over Renata. His eyes found Claire. He walked forward 3 paces, stopped, and in a voice that carried cleanly over the chaos of the entire room, said, Staff Sergeant Whitmore. The ER went quiet in the strange patchwork way that ERs go quiet. The monitors kept beeping, the IV pumps kept pumping, a baby kept crying somewhere behind the triage desk. But every human voice, every human motion simply stopped. Claire finished the compression. She handed the driver to the corporal without looking. She stood up slowly, wiped her palms on the front of her gown, and turned. Her eyes met the colonel's. "Sir? I didn't expect to find you here." "I live here, sir." He looked at her for a long moment. Then his gaze moved slow and deliberate to Victor Hale. And Victor Hale, for the first time since Claire Whitmore had met him 17 months ago, went the color of wet paper. From the far end of the bay, behind the colonel, a man in a black suit stepped through the doors. He was holding a manila envelope. He walked directly to the hospital's chief legal counsel, who had arrived sometime in the last 2 minutes Claire hadn't noticed, and without a word, he handed her the envelope. She opened it. She pulled out a single page. Her face did something Claire had never seen a lawyer's face do in public. The man in the black suit turned, found Claire across the room, and for 1/4 of a second, no longer, he gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. Then he looked at Victor Hale, and he smiled. The chief legal counsel's hand was shaking as she held the paper. Not a tremor, a full shake, the kind that made the document flutter like a moth against glass. She looked up from the page to the man in the black suit, then to Colonel Morrison, then to Victor Hale, and her mouth opened and closed twice without producing sound. "What is it, Janet?" Hale's voice had an edge to it, but underneath the edge was something else, something smaller. Janet Carlyle had been St. Adelaide's chief counsel for 11 years. She'd handled malpractice suits, wrongful death claims, and 3 separate federal investigations into Medicare fraud. She was not easily rattled. She was rattled now. "Victor." Her voice came out hoarse. "We need to talk. Now. I'm in the middle of now." She grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the administrative corridor. Claire watched them go, noting the way Hale's shoulders had drawn up around his ears, the way his left hand was opening and closing into a fist. The colonel was still looking at her. "How many wounded, Staff Sergeant?" 18 critical, 6 stable, 2 DOA. The numbers came out automatically. "We've moved 12 to surgery, 2 to ICU, and 4 are holding for medevac to Boston." "Casualties?" "None since arrival. We lost the 2 on transport." He nodded once, a sharp motion. "Your men?" For a second, Claire didn't understand the question. Then she did. "They're not my men anymore, sir." "They are today." The corporal who'd been holding the Marine's legs stepped forward. Blood was still smeared across his forearms, and his uniform bore the dark stains of the last 30 minutes. He was young, maybe 22, but his eyes were older. "Sir, if I may." The corporal's voice was steady. "Ma'am saved at least 4 lives in there. Maybe more. She knew exactly what she was doing." Colonel Morrison looked at the corporal, then back at Claire. "What's your assessment of the situation here, Corporal?" "Sir, honestly, this place was a shit show until she walked in. No disrespect to the civilian staff, but they don't know combat trauma. She does." "And how do you know that?" The corporal hesitated for half a beat. "Because I've seen her work before, sir." Claire's stomach dropped. "Explain." "Kandahar, sir, F.O.B. Chapman. March 2021. I was 19 on my first deployment. IED took out our convoy, and we lost our medic in the blast. He nodded toward Claire. "She kept me breathing for 3 hours until we could get to a field hospital." The bay had gone quiet again. Not the patchwork quiet of before, but a complete crystalline silence that seemed to press against Claire's eardrums. She could hear the blood in her own head. Colonel Morrison was still looking at her. "Is that accurate, Staff Sergeant?" "Yes, sir." "You left the service in 2022. "Yes, sir." "Honorable discharge. Full benefits. Medical retirement for PTSD and a shoulder injury sustained in service." It wasn't a question. Claire didn't answer. "Yet here you are, in a civilian hospital, working emergency medicine." "Yes, sir." "Why?" The question hung in the air. Claire was aware that 20 people were listening, including Renata, including the young resident who'd been frozen 3 feet away, including the corporal who remembered her from the worst day of his life. She thought about the real answer, which was complicated and had to do with nightmares and survivor's guilt, and the fact that the only place she'd ever felt useful was in a room where people were dying. She thought about the safe answer, which was some version of wanting to serve. She gave him neither. Because I'm good at it. Colonel Morrison's mouth quirked, just slightly. Yes, you are. From the administrative corridor came the sound of raised voices. Not shouting exactly, but the kind of urgent, heated conversation that people have when they're trying very hard not to shout. Claire caught fragments, federal investigation and witness tampering, and something that sounded like 17 counts. The colonel heard it too. He turned toward the sound, then back to Claire. Staff Sergeant, I need to ask you some questions. Not here, privately. Can you step away? The wounded are stable. Your people have it handled. Claire looked around the bay. It was true. The chaos had settled into controlled urgency. The bleeding had stopped. The screaming had stopped. There were still monitors beeping and people moving fast, but it was purposeful now, organized. Renata was running it like she'd been born to it. Okay. The colonel led her to a small conference room on the second floor, the same floor where Isaac Marsh had been standing 12 hours earlier. The room had a long table, 8 chairs, and windows that looked out over the ambulance bay. Through the glass, Claire could see 2 more military vehicles pulling up, and a man in a Navy uniform getting out of the passenger seat of the second one. Colonel Morrison closed the door behind them and gestured to a chair. Claire sat. He didn't. Staff Sergeant Whitmore. Claire. Do you know why I'm here? No, sir. I'm here because 3 hours ago someone sent a video to my office. A 47-second video of a civilian emergency physician assaulting a decorated combat medic. The person who sent it included some additional information about said combat medic that I found interesting. Claire said nothing. According to my files, you served 18 months in Afghanistan as a field medic. You received a Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, and a combat medical badge. You were wounded in action twice and cited for valor once. Your commanding officer's final evaluation noted that you had an exceptional ability to remain calm under extreme duress and consistently demonstrated medical skills beyond her training level. He paused, pulled out a tablet, and set it on the table. What your file doesn't say is that for the last 6 months of your deployment, you weren't just a field medic. You were running trauma surgery in a forward operating base with no supervising physician. You were performing procedures that civilian trauma surgeons train for years to do, and you were saving lives that should not have been saved. Claire's hands were very still in her lap. The person who sent me this video knew that. He knew your complete service record. He knew about the classified operations you participated in. And he knew that what happened to you last night was not just assault. It was assault on someone who has given more to this country than most people ever will. Sir, I'm not finished. His voice was sharp now, carrying the authority of 26 years in the Army. The person who sent me this video also sent me some other information about St. Adelaide Mercy Hospital, financial records, personnel files, internal communications dating back 4 years. Would you like to know what I found? Claire met his eyes. What did you find? I found a pattern. I found 17 women, nurses, residents, 1 attending physician, who have made complaints about Dr. Victor Hale in the past 4 years. I found evidence of systematic intimidation, witness suppression, and what appears to be a coordinated effort by hospital administration to protect Hale at the expense of his victims. The colonel sat down across from her, leaning forward, and I found something else. 3 of those 17 women were veterans, military nurses who left the service and came to work here. All 3 were driven out. All 3 signed non-disclosure agreements, and all 3 had their complaints buried so deep that even an internal investigation wouldn't have found them. Claire's mouth was dry. Who sent you the information? Someone with access to records that shouldn't exist and resources that shouldn't be available to civilians. He paused. Someone who appears to have been watching this situation for a long time. Marsh. You know him? He called me this morning. He said there was a reason he was on the walkway last night, a reason he was recording. Colonel Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Claire, Isaac Marsh is not his real name. His real name is classified above my level. But I can tell you that he works for people who take a very dim view of attacks on military personnel, active or retired. And I can tell you that when someone like him decides to get involved in a situation like this, that situation tends to get resolved very quickly and very thoroughly. What does that mean? It means that Dr. Victor Hale's career is over. It means that St. Adelaide's administration is about to face a federal investigation that will make their Medicare fraud problems look like a parking ticket. And it means that you, whether you like it or not, are about to become the center of a very public reckoning. Claire leaned back in her chair. Through the window, she could see more vehicles arriving. News vans, she realized. 3 of them, with satellite dishes and camera crews. I didn't ask for this. No, but you got it anyway. The colonel's voice was gentler now. Claire, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about what happened to you last night. This is about what's been happening in this hospital for years. You're not Hale's first victim, but if we do this right, you'll be his last. There was a knock on the door. The colonel called, "Come in." It was the man in his black suit, Isaac Marsh, or whoever he really was. He stepped into the room, closed the door behind him, and looked at Claire with those careful, measuring eyes. "Ms. Whitmore, Colonel." He nodded to each of them. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "We were just discussing the situation," Morrison said. "Good, because the situation has developed." Marsh pulled out his own tablet, touched the screen a few times, and set it on the table next to Morrison's. The screen showed what appeared to be a legal document, dense with text. 30 minutes ago, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Boston filed a federal complaint against St. Adelaide Mercy Hospital and Dr. Victor Hale. The charges include civil rights violations, witness intimidation, conspiracy to deprive persons of their constitutional rights, and, he looked directly at Claire, assault on a federal employee. "I'm not a federal employee. You received a VA disability rating for service-connected injuries. That makes you a disabled veteran. Assault on a disabled veteran for reasons related to their service is a federal crime." Claire stared at him. "How do you know about my disability rating?" "The same way I know that your brother in Oregon has stage 3 pancreatic cancer and you've been sending him money for treatment. The same way I know that you've been working double shifts for 6 months to pay for his care. The same way I know that the settlement the hospital offered you this morning was exactly twice what you need to cover his medical expenses through the end of the year. You've been watching me. I've been watching this hospital. You happen to work here." Marsh's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "But yes, when Hale put his hands on you last night, you became my primary concern." "Why?" "Because 27 years ago, a nurse named Sarah Chen was working in the emergency room at Massachusetts General. Dr. Marcus Webb, the head of surgery, had a problem with authority, specifically with nurses who questioned his judgment. One night, Dr. Webb decided to teach Nurse Chen a lesson about respect. He grabbed her by the throat in front of 12 witnesses. Claire's stomach twisted. Nurse Chen filed a complaint. The hospital launched an investigation. The investigation found insufficient evidence. Dr. Webb kept his job. Nurse Chen was transferred to pediatrics, then to night shift, then encouraged to find employment elsewhere. She left medicine entirely 6 months later. Marsh was still looking at Claire, but his eyes had gone somewhere else. Nurse Chen was my sister. She killed herself 2 years after leaving Mass General. The room was completely quiet. Through the window, Claire could see that a 4th news van had arrived. So when I see a decorated combat veteran get assaulted by a surgeon with a pattern of targeting women, and when I see that hospital's administration mobilized to protect the assailant and destroy the victim, Marsh's voice was still level, still controlled, but there was something underneath it now, something that had teeth. I take it personally. Colonel Morrison was looking between them. How long have you been planning this? 4 years, since the first veteran complained. I've been documenting everything, building cases, waiting for the right moment. He looked at Claire. You were the right moment. Because I was military. Because you're credible. Because your record is unimpeachable. Because when you fight back, people believe you. Marsh touched his tablet again. The document disappeared, replaced by what looked like a video file. And because you're not going to take their money and disappear. He pressed play. The video was security footage from the ER, but not the angle Claire had seen before. This was from a camera she hadn't known existed, mounted high in the corner above the central station. The angle was perfect. The audio was clear. It showed, in devastating detail, exactly what had happened in Bay 3. Victor Hale crossing the space. His hands on her scrubs, in her hair. Her complete stillness. The aftermath. But it also showed something else. It showed the 40 seconds before the incident, when Hale had walked into the bay and found Claire already working on the patient. It showed him waiting, watching, building to what came next. It showed premeditation. The hospital's version cuts the first 30 seconds, Marsh said quietly. Makes it look reactive. Heat of the moment. This version shows what really happened. They edited it. They tried to edit it. They have 3 copies. I have the originals from all 4 cameras, plus the audio from the Bay's communication system. Claire was still staring at the tablet. What happens now? Now? Marsh touched the screen and the video stopped. Now we let the federal government do what it does best. Destroy people who think they're untouchable. There was another knock on the door. This time it was Renata, and she looked frazzled in a way Claire had never seen her look frazzled. Claire, they want to see you downstairs, the reporters. They know... She stopped, looking around the room, registering the Colonel and Marsh for the first time. Sorry, I didn't know you were... It's fine, Morrison said. What do the reporters know? They know about the federal complaint. They know about the video. And they know that Claire is the veteran who was assaulted. Renata looked at Claire. They want a statement. No, Claire said immediately. Actually, Marsh said, yes. Claire turned to stare at him. Excuse me? The hospital's going to try to control the narrative. They're going to paint you as disgruntled, unstable, litigious. They're going to say you misunderstood what happened. They're going to say Hale was trying to help you, or that you provoked him, or that the video doesn't show what it appears to show. Marsh stood up. If you don't tell your story, they'll tell it for you. I don't want to be on the news. Neither did my sister. His voice was quiet. But staying silent didn't save her. Claire looked at Colonel Morrison. Sir? It's not my call, Staff Sergeant. But if it were my call, I'd say that 27 other women are watching to see what happens next. And if you walk away quietly, it tells them that quiet is all they can expect. From somewhere in the hospital, Claire could hear the distant sound of commotion. Voices, movement, what might have been security guards dealing with an unexpected crowd. She thought about the Marine downstairs, still in ICU because she'd been there to catch his bleeding. She thought about Marcus and his dog bite. She thought about her brother in Oregon and the settlement offer sitting on her kitchen table. She thought about Victor Hale's hand in her hair and the 2 seconds of absolute silence that had followed. She thought about 18 months in Afghanistan and the things she'd seen and done and survived, and how all of it had led to a 12-hour shift in a civilian ER where she'd been treated like something disposable. Okay, she said, but I want to see the questions first. Marsh nodded. Fair. And I want the full video released, not clips, not excerpts, everything. Already done. It went to 3 networks 15 minutes ago. And I want to know who else is involved, which administrators, which lawyers, who else knew and did nothing. We're working on that. Claire stood up. Through the window, she could see that the crowd outside had grown. There were more news vans, more people with cameras, and what looked like a group of protesters holding signs. She couldn't read them from here, but she could guess. There's something else, Morrison said. The Pentagon is sending a team, Military Assault Response Unit. They'll want to interview you, review your service record, document everything. This is going to get bigger before it gets smaller. How much bigger? Congressional hearings bigger, Senate subcommittee bigger. Think about how big you want this to be, because that's exactly how big it's going to get. Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Has anyone told Dr. Hale about the federal charges? Not yet, Marsh said. Why? Because he's about to find out, and when he does, he's going to do something stupid. What kind of stupid? He's going to try to fix this, and when Victor Hale tries to fix something, people get hurt. As if summoned by her words, the sound of shouting erupted from somewhere below them. Not patient distress, not medical emergency, the kind of shouting that meant confrontation, that meant someone was losing their temper in a public space. Marsh was already moving toward the door. Stay here. Like hell, Claire said, following him. They made it halfway down the corridor before they heard the crash. The crash came from the administrative wing, followed by the unmistakable sound of glass shattering across tile. Claire hit the stairwell door at a run, Marsh 2 steps behind her, Morrison's voice calling out something about protocol that neither of them heard. The stairs were concrete and echo-filled, and Claire took them 3 at a time, her hand barely touching the rail. When she burst through the first-floor door, the scene was already chaos. Victor Hale stood in the center of the administrative lobby. A chair overturned at his feet, and the remains of a glass coffee table spread across the floor in jagged pieces. His face was red, veins standing out at his temples, and his right hand was bleeding from a cut across the palm that he didn't seem to notice. Janet Carlyle stood 10 feet away, her back pressed against the reception desk. And between them was a young man Claire recognized as one of the hospital's PR representatives, holding his hands up in a gesture that was half placating, half defensive. Security was coming from the far corridor, 2 guards in their 50s moving with the kind of urgency that suggested they'd rather be anywhere else. "You don't get to destroy my career over this," Hale was saying, his voice pitched high and raw. 26 years. 26 goddamn years, and you're going to let some bitter nurse with a grudge. "Victor, stop talking." Janet's voice was tight. "I won't stop talking. This is my hospital." "It's not your hospital anymore." Hale's head snapped toward her. "What did you say?" "The board voted 30 minutes ago. You're suspended, effective immediately, pending the federal—" He moved before she could finish, crossing the space between them in 2 long strides. Janet flinched backward, but there was nowhere to go, the desk already at her spine. Hale grabbed her by the shoulders. "You bitch," he said very quietly. "You spineless corporate bitch. You think you can—" Claire didn't think. Thinking would have taken too long, and her body had already decided. She crossed the lobby in 4 strides, grabbed Hale by the back of his collar, and pulled. It was a combat move, the kind designed to extract someone from a vehicle or a fighting position. And Hale came backward off his feet and hit the floor hard enough that the air left his lungs in a rush. He rolled, tried to get up, and Claire put her boot on his chest. Not hard, just enough weight to make a point. "Stay down." Hale stared up at her, his face cycling through shock and rage, and something that might have been fear. You can't." "I already did." The security guards arrived, both of them breathing hard, and stopped when they saw Claire standing over Hale with 1 foot on his sternum. The older of the 2 guards, Miguel from the night shift, took in the scene and made a decision. "Dr. Hale," he said carefully, "I'm going to need you to come with us." "I'm not going anywhere with—" "Sir, you just assaulted Ms. Carlyle in front of witnesses. I can call the police or you can come with us. Your choice." Hale's mouth worked. His eyes went from Miguel to Claire to Janet, who was still pressed against the desk with her hand over her mouth. Then, slowly, he nodded. Claire stepped back. Hale got to his feet, wobbling slightly, and Miguel took his arm with the kind of professional courtesy that barely masked disgust. The 2 guards led him toward the administrative offices, and the lobby went quiet except for the sound of someone's phone buzzing insistently from inside a purse. Janet lowered her hand. "Thank you." Claire said nothing. She was watching Hale's retreating back, watching the way his shoulders had drawn up, watching the tremor in his left hand that hadn't been there before. Marsh appeared at her elbow. "You good?" "Fine." That was a tactical takedown. He was going to hurt her. "I know." Marsh's voice was quiet. "But you just gave him ammunition. He's going to say you assaulted him. Unprovoked attack. Pattern of violence." Claire turned to look at him. "Do I look like I care?" "No. But you should." From the direction of the ER came the sound of raised voices again, this time distinctly civilian. Claire recognized the cadence. Reporters pushing past security, demanding access. She could hear someone shouting about First Amendment rights and someone else threatening to call their lawyer. "They're not going to stop," Marsh said. "Then I'll give them what they want." She walked toward the ER before he could argue, before Morrison could appear and order her to stand down, before anyone could tell her this was a bad idea. The automatic doors slid open and she stepped into a wall of noise and camera lights. There were at least 15 people crammed into the waiting area, half of them holding equipment, the other half holding phones pointed in her direction. Security had formed a human barrier between the reporters and the main ER, but it was a thin barrier and getting thinner. Someone shouted her name. "Ms. Whitmore, can you confirm you're the veteran who was assaulted? Is it true Dr. Hale grabbed you by the hair? How long has this been going on?" Claire stopped in the middle of the waiting area. The cameras swung toward her like a flock of birds changing direction. The noise level dropped, not to silence, but to a focused hush, and she could feel the weight of 27 other women watching through however many screens this would eventually reach. "My name is Claire Whitmore," she said. Her voice was level, projecting without shouting. "I'm a registered nurse. I'm also a former Army combat medic. I served 18 months in Afghanistan. Last night, the head of surgery at this hospital grabbed me by the hair and the front of my scrubs in the middle of the emergency room while I was treating a patient. Someone started to ask a question and she kept talking. I'm not the first woman he's done this to. I'm not even the first veteran, but I am the last. Because as of 30 minutes ago, the U.S. Attorney's Office has filed federal charges against Dr. Victor Hale and this hospital's administration for civil rights violations, witness intimidation, and assault. The questions came in a wave, overlapping and chaotic. Claire picked out 3. Are you going to sue? What do you want people to know? What happens next? She looked directly at the nearest camera. What I want people to know is that this happens. It happens in hospitals. It happens in workplaces. It happens to women who are just trying to do their jobs. And what happens next is that it stops happening, because the women who came before me deserve better. The women who come after me deserve better. And the patients who walk through these doors deserve to know that the people treating them are safe from the people they work with. She turned to walk away and someone called out, Ms. Whitmore, is it true you saved 4 soldiers' lives this morning during the convoy accident? Claire stopped. I did my job. But you were suspended at the time. Apparently not suspended enough. There was a ripple of something through the crowd. Not quite laughter, but close. Claire pushed through the security barrier and back into the ER proper, where Renata was waiting with her arms crossed and an expression that was equal parts proud and furious. That was either the bravest or the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Probably both. You're trending on Twitter. I don't have Twitter. Everyone has Twitter now, apparently. Hashtag Justice for Claire. 14,000 tweets in the last hour. Claire felt something turn over in her stomach. That's not... I didn't want... Too late. You're a symbol now. Renata's phone buzzed and she glanced at it. ICU wants you upstairs. The Marine you worked on is asking for you. Which one? The one with the sternal I-O. He's awake. Claire took the stairs again, not because she was in a hurry, but because she needed the physical motion, needed something to do with her hands and her legs and the nervous energy that felt like electricity under her skin. The ICU was on the 4th floor, a quiet carpeted space that smelled like antiseptic and recycled air. The nurse at the station pointed her to room 407 without looking up. The Marine was 20, maybe 21. His name was Jackson, and he had dark hair buzzed close to his skull and a scar across his left eyebrow from something older than this morning. He was intubated, sedated, monitors beeping in a rhythm that told Claire his heart was working harder than it wanted to, but working nonetheless. A woman sat in the chair beside his bed. His mother, from the look of her, with the same dark hair and the same scar over the same eyebrow. She looked up when Claire entered. You're the one. I'm Claire. Lisa Jackson, his mom. She didn't stand up. They told me you put a needle in his chest. An I-O line. It's a way to deliver fluids when you can't get an IV. They said you probably saved his life. Claire looked at the monitors, at the readout showing oxygen saturation at 94% and blood pressure holding steady at 110/70. He saved his own life by being young and stubborn. He said he knows you from Afghanistan. He was there. I was there. It's a small war. Lisa Jackson studied her for a long moment. He said you held his hand while he was bleeding out. He said you told him stories about your cat to keep him conscious. Claire had no memory of that. It was possible it had happened. A lot of things had happened in Kandahar that she had no memory of anymore. Boxed up and filed somewhere, her conscious mind couldn't reach without significant effort. Dennis, she said. My cat. He's orange, and he's an asshole. Lisa Jackson smiled, just barely. He remembers. From the hallway came the sound of footsteps, multiple sets, moving with purpose. Claire turned to see Colonel Morrison entering with 2 people she didn't recognize. One in dress blues, a captain from the insignia, and one in civilian clothes with the unmistakable bearing of federal law enforcement. Ms. Whitmore, Morrison said. This is Captain Elena Voss from JAG and Special Agent David Kern from the FBI. They need to speak with you. Claire looked back at Lisa Jackson. I'll check on him later. Thank you. In the hallway, Agent Kern gestured toward a small consultation room. This won't take long. It took 90 minutes. They went through the entire night, minute by minute. What Hale had said, where he'd touched her, how hard, the exact sequence of events leading up to the assault, during the assault, after the assault. They showed her the video 4 times from 4 different angles and asked her to confirm details that were clearly visible on the footage. They asked about her service record. They asked about her medical discharge. They asked if she'd ever been treated for anger management issues, for PTSD, for any psychiatric condition that might affect her credibility. Captain Voss was clinical, efficient, taking notes on a tablet with the stylus moving in quick, precise motions. Agent Kern was quieter, more watchful, asking questions that seemed tangential until Claire realized they weren't. How long have you known Isaac Marsh? I met him this morning. On the phone? Yes. And you trusted him? He had information I needed. He also has a personal stake in this case. Claire looked at Kern. I know about his sister. Do you know about his career? He's a private investigator. Former intelligence. He makes a living digging up dirt on people and institutions. He's very good at it. So? So his involvement complicates things. Defense attorneys are going to argue that he manufactured evidence, that he coached you, that this is a personal vendetta masquerading as justice. Did he manufacture the video? No. Then I don't care what they argue. Kern leaned back in his chair. Ms. Whitmore, I'm not trying to attack your credibility. I'm trying to prepare you for what's coming. This is going to be ugly. They're going to dig into every corner of your life, your service record, your medical history, your finances, your relationships. They're going to find things you forgot about and things you thought were private. They're going to use all of it to paint you as unreliable. Let them. It's going to hurt. I've been hurt before. Captain Voss looked up from her tablet. Agent Kern is right, but so are you. The evidence is overwhelming. The video speaks for itself. Hale's pattern of behavior is documented. We have 17 other complainants willing to testify. You're not alone in this. When's the arraignment? Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., Federal Courthouse in Boston. Will I have to be there? No, but you should be. Victims often attend. Claire thought about that. Thought about sitting in a courtroom while Victor Hale stood in front of a judge and entered a plea. Thought about whether she wanted to see his face when the full weight of the charges was read aloud. I'll think about it. They finished at 4:17 p.m. Claire walked out of the consultation room to find the ICU hallway lined with people. Not protesters, not reporters. Staff, nurses, techs, a handful of physicians who weren't part of Hale's inner circle. They weren't holding signs or chanting. They were just there, standing quietly, and when Claire stepped into the corridor, they began to clap. It started slow, scattered, then built into something that filled the hallway and echoed off the walls. Claire stood frozen, not knowing what to do with her hands or her face or the sudden tightness in her throat. Renata was there, and Miguel from security, and Kyle, the resident from the OR who'd been crying in the supply closet. The corporal from this morning was there too, still in his blood-stained uniform, leaning against the far wall with his arms crossed and a small, tight smile. Someone, Claire didn't see who, started a chant. Thank you, Claire. It spread. 20 voices, then 30, then more. She wanted to tell them to stop, that she wasn't special, that she'd just done what anyone would do. But that was a lie, and they all knew it. Most people wouldn't have done it. Most people would have taken the settlement and disappeared. Marsh appeared from somewhere, moving through the crowd with the ease of someone used to navigating spaces that didn't want him. He stopped next to Claire and leaned in close. The hospital's board is meeting right now. Emergency session. They're going to make a statement. What kind of statement? The kind that tries to distance themselves from Hale while maintaining plausible deniability about how much they knew. They knew everything. Proving that is harder. But we're working on it. From down the hallway came the sound of a television, volume turned up. Someone had put the news on in one of the patient rooms and left the door open. Claire could hear her own voice, tinny and strange, saying what happens next is that it stops happening. The applause was fading now, people drifting back to work, or back to wherever they'd come from. The corporal pushed off the wall and walked over. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Sure. Why'd you come back this morning? After everything. You could have stayed home. Claire thought about how to answer that. Thought about the real answer, which was complicated and had to do with muscle memory and guilt and the way her brain had been rewired by 18 months of field medicine. Thought about the simple answer, which was that she hadn't known how to do anything else. Because people were hurt. The corporal nodded slowly. That's what I thought you'd say. He saluted her. It was a real salute, crisp and formal, the kind you gave to a superior officer. Claire, caught off guard, returned it on instinct. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. He walked away. Claire's hand was still at her brow when Marcia's phone rang. He answered, listened for 10 seconds, and his face went very still. When? Pause. How bad? Pause. We're on our way. He hung up, looked at Claire. That was hospital security. They found Victor Hale in his office. He's taken something. Pills, they think. Paramedics are en route, but Claire was already moving. Hale's office was on the 3rd floor, administrative wing, corner office, with windows that overlooked the harbor. Claire had been there exactly once, 14 months ago, to discuss a patient transfer. She remembered dark wood furniture and diplomas on the wall and the smell of expensive coffee. When she kicked the door open, because kicking seemed faster than trying the handle, the first thing she saw was the bottle. Empty. Orange prescription bottle on the desk, cap off, no pills visible. Hale was on the floor behind the desk, on his side, breathing but not conscious. His skin had a gray tint that Claire recognized instantly as poor perfusion. Foam at the corner of his mouth, pupils blown. Marsh came through the door behind her. Ambulance is 2 minutes out. That's too long. Claire dropped to her knees, checked Hale's pulse. Thready, irregular. How many pills were in that bottle? I don't know. She grabbed the bottle, squinted at the label. Lorazepam, 2 milligram tablets, prescribed 3 weeks ago, 30 count. If he'd taken them all. Get me Narcan. Now. ER should have it. Marsh ran. Claire turned Hale onto his side, tilted his head to keep his airway clear. His breathing was shallow, maybe 8 breaths a minute, and slowing. She put her fingers on his carotid and counted. Pulse was dropping. This would be easy, a voice in the back of her head said. All she had to do was nothing. Wait for the ambulance. By the time they arrived, it might be too late. Lorazepam overdose was survivable, but not always. Not if you took enough. Not if you were alone. Victor Hale had put his hands on her. He'd tried to destroy her career. He'd assaulted at least 17 other women and gotten away with it for years. He'd grabbed Janet Carlisle 4 hours ago and would have done worse if Claire hadn't stopped him. The world would not miss Victor Hale. She pressed 2 fingers harder against his neck, feeling the pulse flutter and fade. Dennis the cat kneaded her chest every morning at 6 a.m. Marcus had asked her what school he went to before she'd started the sutures. Lisa Jackson had dark hair like her son and a scar over the same eyebrow. The corporal remembered her from Kandahar. 27 women were watching to see what happened next. Claire tilted Hale's head back, pinched his nose, and gave him a rescue breath. His chest rose. Fell. She gave him another. Marsh burst back through the door with a Narcan kit and a nurse Claire didn't know. The nurse took one look at the scene and started unpacking the kit without being asked. Intranasal, 4 milligrams. Claire held Hale's head steady while the nurse administered the dose. Come on, Claire said very quietly. Don't you dare. 30 seconds. 40. Hale's breathing didn't change. The pulse under Claire's fingers was barely there. Second dose, the nurse said. They gave him another 4 milligrams. Claire kept one hand on his pulse and the other on his chest, feeling for the rise and fall that would mean his respiratory drive was coming back. The room was very quiet. Somewhere in the building, an alarm was going off, a different alarm from the usual codes, something administrative and distant. At 70 seconds, Hale gasped. His eyes flew open, unfocused and wild. He tried to sit up and Claire pushed him back down. Stay still. Paramedics are coming. Don't. His voice was a rasp. Don't touch me. I'm not touching you. I'm keeping you from aspirating your own vomit. He turned his head and threw up, missing Claire's hand by about 2 inches. The smell was acrid and chemical. She kept him on his side while he heaved, kept his airway clear, kept counting his pulse. Still irregular but stronger now, climbing towards 60. The paramedics arrived 90 seconds later with a gurney and a full kit. Claire gave them the handoff. Lorazepam OD, unknown quantity, 2 doses intranasal Narcan, Response after second dose, vitals stabilizing. They got him loaded, got an IV in, got him moving toward the ambulance bay. Claire stood up, looked at her hands, realized they were shaking. Marsh was leaning against the wall, watching her. You saved him. Yeah. After everything he did. Yeah. Why? Claire wiped her hands on her pants. Because that's the job. That's not the job. You're not on duty. You're not his nurse. You could have let him die, and nobody would have blamed you. I would have blamed me. She walked out of the office, down the corridor, past the gathering crowd of staff who'd heard about the suicide attempt and come to see. Someone tried to stop her, tried to ask if she was okay, and she kept walking. She made it to the women's bathroom on the second floor before the shaking got bad enough that she had to sit down. She sat on the tile floor with her back against the stall door and her head between her knees and waited for her hands to stop trembling. It took 6 minutes. When she came out, Renata was waiting. You good? No. Fair. Renata handed her a bottle of water. Drink this. Claire drank half the bottle in one go. Her throat was raw and she hadn't noticed until now. Is he going to make it? Yeah, unfortunately. Renata paused. That was the right thing to do. Saving him. Doesn't feel right. It will. Eventually. Renata's phone buzzed. She looked at it and her expression shifted. Claire, the board just released their statement. And? They're claiming they had no knowledge of Hale's pattern of behavior. They're saying he acted alone, that the administration took appropriate action as soon as they were made aware, and that they're cooperating fully with federal investigators. That's a lie. Yeah, but it's a very carefully worded lie. Renata handed her the phone. Read it. Claire read. The statement was 3 paragraphs of corporate nothing, all passive voice and careful phrasing. Concerns were raised, actions were taken, policies will be reviewed. Nothing about the 17 complaints, nothing about the edited footage, nothing about the NDAs or the settlements or the systematic protection of a predator. They're going to get away with it, Claire said. Maybe. Or maybe Marsh has more ammunition. As if summoned, Marsh appeared in the bathroom doorway. This is the women's room. I'm aware. Claire, I need you to come with me. Where? Hospital conference room. There are people you need to meet. What people? The other victims. Claire's stomach dropped. They're here? 14 of them. They flew in, drove in, took buses. They want to meet you. They want to say thank you. Marsh paused. And they want to know if you're willing to fight. I'm already fighting. Not like this. They want to file a class action, civil suit against the hospital and everyone who protected Hale. They need a lead plaintiff, someone credible, someone sympathetic, someone who can stand up in court and make a jury believe that this happened. Claire looked at Renata, then back at Marsh. Why me? Because you're the one who didn't sign. You're the one who came back. You're the one they can't discredit. He held out his hand. You coming? She took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. The conference room was on the first floor, normally used for administrative meetings and budget presentations. When Claire walked in, 14 women looked up, ages ranging from maybe 25 to mid-50s. Some in scrubs, some in civilian clothes. One was in a Navy uniform. They all had the same look in their eyes. The look of people who'd been told they were crazy, who'd been paid to be quiet, who'd been convinced that what happened to them was their fault. A woman in her 40s stood up. Latina, dark hair cut short, a scar across her left wrist that Claire recognized as defensive. You're Claire? Yeah. I'm Maria Salazar. I worked here 2019 to 2021. Hale grabbed me in the OR and I filed a complaint. They offered me $80,000 to go away. I took it. Another woman stood, younger, maybe 30. Jessica Lynn, night shift, 2020. He cornered me in the supply closet. I didn't take their money, but I transferred to another hospital. I should have stayed and fought. One by one, they introduced themselves. Nurses, residents, one attending who'd left medicine entirely. Each story was different, and each story was the same. Assault, complaint, intimidation, silence. The woman in the Navy uniform stood last. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Brennan. I was here for 2 years after my service. Hale grabbed me in front of patients. When I reported it, they said I was suffering from PTSD and suggested I seek psychiatric help. I left the profession entirely. Claire felt something building in her chest, something hot and tight. How many of you signed NDAs? 11 hands went up. How many of you want to break them? All 14 hands stayed up. Maria Salazar stepped forward. We want to fight, but we need someone to lead, someone they can't ignore, someone who's still standing when the rest of us got knocked down. She looked directly at Claire. We need you. Claire looked around the room, at 14 faces watching her, at Marsh standing by the door, at Renata in the hallway beyond, arms crossed, waiting. If we do this, Claire said slowly, it gets worse before it gets better. They'll come after all of us. They'll drag up every mistake, every bad day, every moment we weren't perfect. They'll make us look like we're lying or bitter or incompetent. They'll try to destroy us. They already destroyed us, Jessica Lynn said quietly. At least this way we take them down too. Claire was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay. The room erupted. Not cheering exactly, but a release of tension that had been building for years. Maria grabbed Claire's hand. Sarah Brennan saluted her again, and this time Claire couldn't tell if she was being serious or not. Marsh moved to the front of the room and started laying out the plan. Depositions, discovery, trial timeline. It would take months, maybe years. Claire's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Isaac's real phone. The arraignment is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Hale will be there. You should be too. Show them you're not afraid. She texted back. I'll be there. Good. One more thing. The hospital's insurance carrier just dropped their coverage. As of 20 minutes ago, St. Adelaide is uninsured and facing 17 federal charges, plus a class action lawsuit. They're going to file for bankruptcy protection within the week. Claire stared at the phone. A hospital couldn't just shut down. There were patients, staff, equipment, years of records. What happens to the patients? They'll be transferred. The building will probably be sold. Everything inside it will be liquidated. Good. She put the phone away, looked up to find Marsh watching her. You okay? Getting there. From somewhere in the building came the sound of another alarm. Not medical. Not fire. Something administrative. Something that meant systems were failing. That meant the infrastructure of St. Adelaide Mercy was beginning to crumble from the inside out. Claire walked to the window. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The harbor was visible beyond the parking lot, gray water under gray sky. And somewhere in the distance, she could see the lights of a ship moving toward open ocean. Behind her, 14 women were planning a war. Tomorrow morning, she would stand in a federal courthouse and watch Victor Hale face charges. But tonight, for the first time in 4 years, Claire Whitmore felt something that was almost like peace. She turned back to the room. Okay, let's get to work. How about? The conference room emptied out around midnight. Plans were made, contact information exchanged, lawyers conferenced in by phone. Maria Salazar hugged Claire hard enough to crack her spine. Sarah Brennan shook her hand with a grip that said, "We're in this together." One by one, they filtered out until it was just Claire and Marsh and the scattered remains of 14 cups of coffee. You should go home, Marsh said. So should you. I don't sleep much. Neither do I. He smiled, just a little. We're going to win this. How do you know? Because they've been getting away with it for so long that they forgot how to fight someone who won't back down. He gathered his tablet and his phone. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Claire left through the ambulance bay. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few scattered cars and the distant sound of traffic on I-73. Her Toyota was where she'd left it that morning, which felt like a lifetime ago. She got in, started the engine, and sat there for a moment with her hands on the wheel. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Hello? Ms. Whitmore. The voice was male, older, unfamiliar. My name is Thomas Webb. I'm the former chief of surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital. Claire's hands tightened on the wheel. Marsh told me about you. I'm sure he did. I'm calling because I need you to know something. What I did to Sarah, to Isaac Marsh's sister, it destroyed her. And it destroyed me too, just slower. I've spent 27 years trying to make up for it, and I'll never get there. Why are you telling me this? Because Victor Hale is about to go through what I went through, and he won't survive it. Not the way he is now, but you will. And the women you're fighting with will, and that matters. The line was quiet for a moment. Ms. Whitmore, don't become what I was. Don't let this make you cruel. I saved his life tonight. I know. That's how I know you'll be okay. He hung up. Claire sat in the parking lot for another 5 minutes, then drove home. Dennis was waiting by the door when she walked in, meowing indignantly about dinner being late. She fed him, made herself a sandwich she didn't eat, and sat at the kitchen table looking at the portfolio from the hospital's lawyers. It was still there, still offering her enough money to disappear. She picked it up, walked to the trash can, and dropped it in. Then she went to bed. She woke at 5:47 a.m. to her phone ringing. Colonel Morrison. Staff Sergeant, turn on the news. Claire grabbed the remote, hit power. Every channel was showing the same thing. Aerial footage of St. Adelaide Mercy Hospital, police cars, federal vehicles, people in FBI windbreakers carrying boxes out of the administrative wing. The Chiron read, Federal raid underway at Beacon Harbor Hospital. Multiple arrests expected. They're moving fast, Morrison said. Faster than I expected. They must have found something big. Claire watched 2 agents emerge from the building carrying a filing cabinet between them. What did they find? I don't know yet, but I'm guessing we'll find out at the arraignment. The arraignment was at 9. Claire had 4 hours. She showered, dressed in the only business casual outfit she owned, and drove to Boston. The federal courthouse was a granite monolith on Congress Street, all sharp angles and tinted windows. There were protesters outside, maybe 50 of them, carrying signs that said, Believe survivors and justice for Claire, and no more silence. Claire parked 3 blocks away and walked. A woman recognized her halfway there and started clapping. Others joined in. By the time Claire reached the courthouse steps, there were people chanting her name. She kept her head down and went inside. The courtroom was packed. Claire found a seat in the 3rd row next to a woman she didn't know who whispered, Thank you for doing this. The gallery was full of reporters, victims, supporters, and what looked like half the nursing staff from St. Adelaide. Renata was there. Miguel, Kyle the resident, the corporal from yesterday, now in dress blues. At 8:59, the bailiff called, All rise. The judge entered. A woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses on a chain. She sat, surveyed the courtroom, and said, This is the matter of United States versus Victor Allen Hale. Counsel, please state your appearances. The prosecution went first. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Novak, mid-40s, with the kind of confidence that came from winning cases nobody thought could be won. She stood and announced herself and her co-counsel. Then the defense. 2 lawyers in suits that cost more than Claire's car, names she didn't catch, representing Hale on charges that included assault, deprivation of civil rights, conspiracy, and witness tampering. Bring in the defendant. The door at the back of the courtroom opened and Victor Hale walked in. He looked smaller than he had 2 days ago. Smaller and older, and somehow deflated, like something inside him had been punctured and was slowly leaking out. He was in an orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled, and when he looked up at the gallery, his eyes passed over Claire without recognition. The judge read the charges, all 17 counts, each one more damning than the last. How does the defendant plead? One of Hale's lawyers stood. Not guilty, Your Honor. Bail? The prosecution objected. Flight risk, danger to witnesses, pattern of intimidation. Hale's lawyer argued otherwise. Community ties, no prior criminal record, willing to surrender passport. The judge listened to both sides and said, Bail is set at $500,000 cash bond. Defendant will surrender passport, submit to GPS monitoring, and have no contact with any witnesses or victims. Next hearing is set for... The back door of the courtroom banged open. Everyone turned. 3 FBI agents entered, moving fast. The lead agent walked directly to the prosecution table and handed Rachel Novak a folder. She opened it, read 2 pages, and her expression went absolutely still. She stood. Your Honor, the government has just received new evidence that substantially changes the scope of this case. We request a brief recess. The judge frowned. How brief? 30 minutes? Granted, court is in recess. The gavel fell. Hale was let out. The courtroom erupted into whispers and speculation. Claire sat frozen, watching Rachel Novak and her co-counsel huddle in the corner with the FBI agents, watching them flip through page after page of whatever was in that folder. Marsh appeared at her elbow. Something's happening. I can see that. No, I mean something big. Those agents came straight from St. Adelaide. Whatever they found this morning, His phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his face went white. What? Claire said. They found a server, hidden in Hale's office. It's got files, surveillance footage, audio recordings, going back 12 years. Recordings of what? Everything, every assault, every complaint, every conversation where the administration decided to bury evidence. He looked up at her. Claire, they didn't just protect him. They documented it. Every single time. Claire felt something cold settle in her stomach. Why would they do that? Insurance, blackmail. I don't know. But they kept records of everything they were supposed to destroy. The 30-minute recess stretched to 45. When the judge returned, her expression had changed. So had Rachel Novak's. Counsel, approach. Both sides went to the bench. There was a whispered conference that lasted 3 minutes. Claire could see Hale's lawyers shaking their heads, looking shocked. When they returned to their tables, one of them looked like he wanted to vomit. The judge addressed the courtroom. In light of new evidence, the government is filing additional charges against Dr. Victor Hale and is also charging 3 members of St. Adelaide Mercy Hospital's executive board with conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and racketeering under the RICO Act. The courtroom exploded. The judge banged her gavel twice. Furthermore, the government is requesting that Dr. Hale's bail be revoked pending further investigation. Hale's lawyer stood. Your Honor, that's denied. Dr. Hale will be remanded to federal custody. Hearing for the additional defendants will be scheduled within 72 hours. This court is adjourned. She left. Hale was let out, and this time when his eyes passed over the gallery, they found Claire. For just a second, they locked onto her. His mouth opened like he wanted to say something. Then he was gone. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had doubled. News vans lined the street. Reporters shouted questions. Someone had brought a megaphone and was leading a chant. Claire pushed through, heading for her car, and almost made it before a reporter stepped in front of her with a microphone. Miss Whitmore, how do you feel about the additional charges? Relieved. Do you think this sends a message? I think it sends 14 messages, 1 for every woman he hurt. What happens next? Claire looked directly at the camera. Justice. She got in her car and drove home. Dennis was asleep on the couch. The afternoon sun was coming through the windows at an angle that made the whole apartment look gold. Her phone was buzzing nonstop. Texts from Renata, from Maria, from people she hadn't talked to in years. She ignored all of them, picked up Dennis, and sat on the couch with him purring in her lap. For 5 minutes, she let herself breathe. Then her phone rang. Not a text. A call. From a number she recognized now. Marsh, turn on Channel 7. She grabbed the remote. Channel 7 was showing footage of St. Adelaide. Not aerial this time, ground level, live. 3 people in handcuffs being led out by federal agents. Claire recognized 2 of them, Janet Carlisle and the hospital's CEO, Richard Porter. The third was the head of HR. The news anchor was saying something about racketeering and conspiracy and the largest investigation into hospital misconduct in Massachusetts history. They're all going down, Marsh said quietly. Every single one of them. Good. Claire, his voice changed. There's something else. We found files on the server, patient files. They were using patient information to blackmail staff into silence. Her blood went cold. Which patients? I can't tell you that yet, but there's a name in there you need to know about. Your brother, Tyler Whitmore. Pancreatic cancer. They knew about him. They knew you were sending him money. That's why the settlement was exactly what it was. Claire couldn't breathe. They targeted me. They targeted everyone, anyone with leverage, anyone vulnerable. She closed her eyes. How deep does this go? Deeper than we thought. We're finding connections to other hospitals, other physicians, a whole network of... A crash from the television made her look up. On screen, someone had thrown a brick through one of St. Adelaide's windows. Security was trying to hold back a crowd that had grown from protesters to something uglier. People were shouting. Someone had spray-painted "Burn it down" across the ambulance bay doors. Marsh, what's happening? People are angry. They're finding out what was done to them, to their families, to people they trusted. It's getting out of control. Can you stop it? I don't think anyone can. Claire watched the screen, watched the crowd surge, watched security fall back, watched someone light something on fire in the parking lot. Then she saw movement in one of the upper windows. A face. Someone still inside. Marsh, there are patients in there. I know. They're evacuating now, but it's... The line went dead. Claire was on her feet, grabbing her keys, running for the door before she'd made a conscious decision to move. Dennis yowled as she dumped him off her lap. She didn't stop. She was in her car, engine started, pulling out of the parking lot as the news showed the crowd at St. Adelaide growing larger, angrier, more dangerous. She made it to the hospital in 14 minutes. The parking lot was chaos. Police were trying to set up a perimeter, but there weren't enough of them. The crowd had surrounded the building. Someone had set off the fire alarm and it was shrieking into the twilight. Claire abandoned her car on the street and ran toward the ambulance bay. A police officer tried to stop her. Ma'am, you can't... I'm a nurse. There are patients inside. We're evacuating. Then let me help. She ducked under his arm and ran for the doors. They were locked. She pounded on the glass and someone inside, a security guard she didn't recognize, opened them just wide enough for her to slip through. The ER was in chaos. Staff were wheeling patients toward the exits, some crying, some shouting into phones. Alarms were going off everywhere. Smoke was starting to fill the corridors from whatever was burning outside. Renata saw her and grabbed her arm. Claire, what are you doing here? Helping. How many patients left? 12. We can't get them out fast enough. The elevators are down and half of them can't take the stairs. Where's the backup generator? It's running, but it's not designed for a full evacuation. A crash from somewhere above them. Glass breaking. Someone was inside the building who shouldn't be. Claire looked around the bay. At the patients, at the staff, at the smoke beginning to curl down from the ceiling. Get everyone to the ambulance bay, she said. Load them into any vehicle that can move. Ambulances, police cars, I don't care. Just get them out. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure no one gets left behind. She ran for the stairs. The stairwell was dark. Emergency lighting cast everything in sickly green, and the smoke was thicker here, rolling down from above in waves that made Claire's eyes water. She pulled her jacket over her mouth and kept climbing. Second floor. Empty. Bed stripped, equipment already moved. She could hear shouting from outside, muffled through the walls, and something that might have been gunshots or might have been fireworks. The distinction didn't matter. Third floor. Not empty. An elderly man sat in a wheelchair at the end of the corridor, alone, staring at the wall. Claire ran to him. No ID bracelet, no chart. His hospital gown was old, faded from too many washes. Sir, we need to move. He didn't respond. Didn't blink. She checked his pupils, reactive but slow. Sedated maybe, or just confused. She grabbed the wheelchair handles and started pulling him toward the stairs. Wait. The voice came from one of the patient rooms. Claire stopped, turned. A woman stepped out, mid-30s, wearing scrubs, a stethoscope around her neck. Claire recognized her vaguely from the night shift. There's 2 more, the woman said. Room 304 and 307. I can't move them alone. What about the rest of the staff? Gone. I stayed because... She gestured at the corridor, at the impossible math of it. Someone had to. Claire looked at the woman, then at the old man in the wheelchair, then at the smoke getting thicker by the second. Okay, you take him down. I'll get the others. Both of them? I'll figure it out. The woman grabbed the wheelchair and disappeared into the stairwell. Claire ran to 304. Inside was a woman in her 50s, post-surgical, drain tubes running from her abdomen to a collection bag hung on the bed rail. She was awake, eyes wide, breathing fast. They forgot me. They didn't forget you. They're just slow. Claire checked the IV, saline, nothing critical. She pulled it. Can you walk? I don't know. We're going to find out. She got the woman upright, one arm around her waist, and moved her to the door. Hold here. Don't move. I'm getting your neighbor. Room 307 was worse. The patient was a young man, maybe 25, on a ventilator, fully sedated. The machine was running on battery backup and the battery indicator was flashing red. Claire looked at the vent settings, looked at the patient's chest rising and falling in mechanical rhythm, and felt something cold settle behind her ribs. She couldn't move him, not on the vent, not alone. If she disconnected him, he'd have maybe 3 minutes before his oxygen saturation dropped into dangerous territory, and that was if his respiratory drive was intact enough to breathe on his own. If it wasn't, she'd be carrying a dead man down 4 flights of stairs. The door behind her opened. The woman from 304 stood there, leaning heavily on the frame. "I can walk," she said. "Slowly, but I can walk." "Good. Go to the stairwell. Wait for me there." "What about him?" "I'm working on it." The woman left. Claire looked at the ventilator again, at the young man's face, slack and pale under the oxygen mask, at the battery indicator that was now solid red. She pulled out her phone. No signal. The smoke had gotten thick enough that the overhead lights were barely visible. The fire alarm was still shrieking, a constant high-pitched wail that made it hard to think. Okay. She disconnected the vent. The alarm screamed immediately, as a different pitch from the fire alarm, sharper and more urgent. She switched off the machine, removed the tubing from the patient's endotracheal tube, and started bagging him manually with the ambu bag hanging on the wall. Squeeze, release, watching his chest, counting seconds. She couldn't bag him and carry him, but she could bag him and drag him. She grabbed the sheet under him and pulled. He slid off the bed and onto the floor with a thump that would have made her wince in any other situation. She kept bagging with one hand, dragged him with the other. Out the door, down the corridor. The woman from 304 stared. "Help me," Claire said. "Grab his feet." The woman grabbed his feet. Together they hauled him to the stairwell door. Claire wedged it open with a fire extinguisher, then started down, backwards, 1 step at a time. Bagging between steps. The woman from 304 followed, moving slow but steady. First landing, second landing. Claire's arms were burning. The smoke was worse here, pouring up from below now, and she could hear crackling that meant fire was inside the building. "Keep going," she said to the woman. "Don't stop." They made it to the first floor. The doors to the ER were open and people were running in both directions. Claire dragged the young man through the chaos, still bagging, and someone, one of the paramedics, saw what she was doing and came running. "I got him! Go!" Claire let go. The paramedic took over bagging, called for a gurney, and the young man was lifted and rushed toward an ambulance. The woman from 304 was already being helped outside by a nurse Claire didn't recognize. She turned to go back upstairs. "Claire, no." Renata appeared from somewhere, grabbed her arm. "Everyone's out. Building's clear." "You're sure?" "Security did a sweep. You were the last one in." A window exploded somewhere above them. Glass rained down onto the ambulance bay and people screamed and ran. The fire was visible now, orange flames licking out of the 3rd floor. "We need to move," Renata said. They ran. Outside, the scene was barely controlled chaos. Patients on gurneys lined the sidewalk. Ambulances were loading and leaving as fast as they could. The crowd had pulled back from the building, but not by much, and police were struggling to maintain a perimeter. News helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights cutting through the smoke. Claire found a curb and sat down hard. Her hands were shaking again. Someone handed her a bottle of water, and she drank it without tasting. A fire truck arrived, then another. Firefighters started deploying hoses, but it was clear they were more concerned with containment than saving the building. "Let it burn. Let the whole thing burn." Marsh found her 20 minutes later. He looked exhausted, his suit jacket gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up and stained with soot. "You okay?" "Define okay." He sat down next to her. For a while they just watched the building burn. The flames had spread to the 4th floor now. The roof was starting to buckle. "They found more files," Marsh said finally, "on the server, not just about Hale, about everyone. The whole board. The CFO was embezzling. The head of oncology was running a kickback scheme with pharmaceutical reps. The billing department was committing insurance fraud on a scale that—" He stopped. This place was rotten all the way through. How many people knew? All of them. Everyone in administration. They were all protecting each other. Claire watched a section of the roof collapse inward, sending up a shower of sparks. "Good riddance." Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Turn on the news." Channel 4. She pulled up the channel on her phone. The screen showed a reporter standing outside the federal courthouse in Boston. Behind her, people were being led out in handcuffs. Claire recognized Richard Porter, the CEO, then Janet Carlisle, then 3 other people she'd seen at board meetings but never knew by name. The reporter was saying something about additional arrests, about charges of racketeering and conspiracy, about a criminal enterprise that had operated for over a decade. "They're all going down," Marsh said quietly. "Every single one." "What about the patients? Where do they go?" "Mass General is taking the critical cases. Other hospitals are absorbing the rest. But Claire," he paused. "St. Adelaide is done. The building's condemned. The insurance won't cover the damage. They're filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Complete liquidation." Claire thought about that. About 12 years of her life spent in that building. About the night shifts and the double shifts and the patients she'd saved and the ones she'd lost. About Marcus with the dog bite and the Marine with the sternal I.O. and the old man in the wheelchair who'd been sitting alone on the 3rd floor. "What happens to the staff?" "Most will find work. Hospitals always need nurses, but some—" He didn't finish. Claire understood. Some wouldn't find work. Some had been too complicit. Some had known what was happening and done nothing, and that would follow them. "What about Hale?" "Trial's set for 6 months from now, but with the new evidence, he's looking at 20 years minimum. The RICO charges carry a life sentence." "Good." Marsh stood up. "Come on, I'm driving you home. My car is somewhere in a tow zone by now. I'll take care of it." She didn't argue. She was too tired to argue. They drove in silence through Beacon Harbor, past the harbor itself where fishing boats were coming in for the night, past the neighborhoods where lights were coming on in windows. Normal people doing normal things. Going home. Making dinner. Unaware that 6 blocks away, a hospital was burning to the ground and taking a decade of corruption with it. Marsh pulled up in front of her building. "Get some sleep." "I don't think I can." "Try anyway." She got out, made it halfway to her door before she heard him call her name. "Claire." She turned. "What you did tonight? Going back in. That was—" He stopped. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess you did." She went inside. Dennis was furious about missing dinner. She fed him, tried to eat something herself, gave up. She sat on her couch and turned on the news. Every channel was covering the fire. Aerial footage showed the building fully engulfed now. Firefighters still pouring water on it, but making no real progress. The chyron scrolled past. Hospital burns amid federal investigation. 17 arrested in corruption scandal. Military veterans assault sparks national reckoning. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Hello? Ms. Whitmore, this is Senator Patricia Vance. I'm on the Senate Health Committee. I'd like to speak with you about testifying." Claire's hand tightened on the phone. "Testifying where?" "We're launching an investigation into systemic abuse in healthcare settings, particularly targeting military veterans. Your case has brought to light patterns we've been seeing across the country. We'd like you to tell your story to Congress." "When?" 3 weeks. Washington. You'd be the lead witness." Claire looked at the television, at the building burning, at her own face on the screen, a photo someone had pulled from somewhere, her in her army uniform with the bronze star on her chest. "I'll think about it." "Please do. We need voices like yours, people who won't be silenced." The senator hung up. Claire sat staring at her phone until the screen went dark. The next morning, she woke to 73 text messages and 42 missed calls. She ignored all of them and drove to the hospital. What was left of it, anyway. The fire had burned through the night. The building was a blackened shell now, still smoking, the entire structure unsafe to enter. Yellow caution tape surrounded the perimeter. News vans were already set up, reporters doing live shots with the ruins as backdrop. Claire parked across the street and just looked at it. A woman appeared at her window. Maria Salazar. "I heard you went back in," Maria said. "During the fire." "Someone had to." "You could have died." "But I didn't." Maria was quiet for a moment. "The others want to meet. All 14 of us. Plus anyone else who wants to join the suit. We're meeting at a law office downtown this afternoon. You should come." "I'll be there." The law office was on the 14th floor of a glass tower overlooking the harbor. The conference room had windows on 3 sides and a table that could seat 30. By the time Claire arrived, there were 22 women already there. 14 from yesterday. 8 more who'd seen the news and decided they were done being silent. A lawyer named Patricia Chen, no relation to Marcia's sister, stood at the head of the table. She was maybe 45, with sharp eyes and the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. "Let's start with what we know," she said. "Federal prosecutors have enough evidence to convict Hale and at least 6 members of St. Adelaide's leadership on criminal charges. That's good. That's justice. But it doesn't get you compensation. It doesn't hold the institution accountable for the culture that enabled this. That's why we're filing a civil suit." She clicked a remote and a presentation appeared on the screen behind her. Class action. Medical malpractice, negligent retention, hostile work environment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We're seeking compensatory damages for all victims, punitive damages against the hospital and its board, and a consent decree that forces any successor organization to implement oversight mechanisms. One of the new women raised her hand. "But the hospital's bankrupt." "The hospital is. The board members aren't. Neither is the insurance carrier that covered them until yesterday. We're going after personal assets, bank accounts, property, retirement funds, everything." A murmur went through the room. Patricia waited for it to settle. "This will take time. A year, maybe 2. Discovery will be brutal. They'll try to discredit each of you individually. They'll subpoena your medical records, your employment files, your personal communications. They'll look for anything they can use to make you look unreliable." She looked directly at Claire. "And they'll focus on you hardest of all. Because you're the face of this. You're the one who fought back. You're the one the media cares about. If they can destroy your credibility, the whole case gets weaker." Claire met her eyes. "Let them try. They will. They'll dig into your military service, your medical discharge. They'll find every mistake you ever made and blow it up. They'll question your mental health, your judgment, your motivations. Are you ready for that?" "I'm here, aren't I?" Patricia smiled, just a little. "Yes. Yes, you are." They spent 3 hours going over the case. Timelines, evidence, witness lists, who would testify to what. By the time they finished, it was dark outside and Claire's head was pounding. She walked out with Maria. The elevator was glass-walled, offering a view of the city lights spreading out toward the ocean. "You okay?" Maria asked. "Ask me in a year." "Fair." Maria paused. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you didn't take their money." "So am I." They parted ways in the lobby. Claire drove home through streets that felt different somehow, like the city itself had shifted while she wasn't looking. She passed the ruins of St. Adelaide, still cordoned off, still smoking faintly in the November cold. Her phone rang. "Marsh. Have you seen the news?" "Which news?" "All of it. Turn on Channel 7. She pulled over, grabbed her phone. Channel 7 was showing what looked like a press conference. The banner read breaking, "Major hospital chain announces policy changes." A man in an expensive suit stood at a podium. Claire recognized him, CEO of Northeastern Health Systems, the 3rd largest hospital network in New England. "In light of recent events," he was saying, "we are implementing immediate changes to our reporting procedures for workplace harassment and assault. All complaints will be reviewed by an independent third-party investigator. No administrator will have the authority to suppress or dismiss complaints. Retaliation against complainants will result in immediate termination." Questions from reporters. The CEO fielded them smoothly, professionally, using words like transparency and accountability and zero tolerance. "This is because of you," Marsh said, "because of what happened. They're scrambling. Every hospital in the region is scrambling to make sure they're not the next St. Adelaide. They should have been doing this already." "Yeah, but they weren't, and now they are." Claire watched the rest of the press conference. Watched 3 more hospital networks announce similar changes. Watched a state senator propose new legislation. Watched the story spread. "Marsh, what you said before, about me becoming the face of this, I don't want that." "Too late. You already are." She hung up. Sat in her car for a long time watching the city lights blur through the windshield. Her phone rang again. This time it was a number she recognized. Colonel Morrison. "Staff Sergeant, how are you holding up?" "I've been better, sir." "I imagine. I'm calling because the Pentagon wants to give you something. A commendation for the work you did during the convoy accident. You saved lives, performed combat medicine under fire, civilian fire, but fire nonetheless. They want to recognize that. I don't need recognition. I know, but you're getting it anyway. Ceremonies in 2 weeks. Full military honors. Your choice whether to attend. Claire thought about that. About standing in dress blues while someone pinned a medal on her chest. About cameras and speeches, and all the attention she'd spent 4 years trying to avoid. Can I think about it? Of course, but Claire... He paused. This matters. Not just for you. For every veteran who came home and kept serving. They need to see that we take care of our own. After he hung up, Claire sat in the dark car and let herself feel it. All of it. The exhaustion and the anger and the grief for something she couldn't quite name. For the person she'd been 2 days ago. For the quiet life she'd tried to build. For the illusion that keeping her head down and doing good work would be enough. It hadn't been enough. It never would have been. She drove home, fed Dennis, made tea she didn't drink, and then she sat down at her kitchen table and opened her laptop. She wrote an email to Senator Vance. 3 sentences. I'll testify. Tell me when and where. I'll be there. She hit send before she could second guess it. Then she opened another email, this one to the nurse who'd stayed on the 3rd floor with her, the one who'd helped her move the patients. She didn't know the woman's name, but she knew her employee number from the badge she'd been wearing. Thank you. You saved lives tonight. Don't let anyone tell you different. She sent that too. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Jessica Lynn. From the meeting, I just wanted to say thank you. For everything. For fighting when the rest of us couldn't. Then another text. Sarah Brennan. Then Maria. Then women whose names she barely knew, thanking her, telling her their stories, asking if she needed anything. Claire read them all. Answered each one. It took an hour. When she finally closed her phone and went to bed, it was after midnight. She expected nightmares, the fire, the smoke, the young man on the ventilator. Instead, she slept dreamlessly for 9 hours straight and woke to sunlight streaming through her windows. Her phone showed 16 new messages. She ignored them and made coffee. The 17th message came through while she was pouring her second cup. Marsh, check your email. Now. She opened her laptop. The email was from Patricia Chen, the lawyer. Subject line, settlement offer. Claire's stomach dropped. She opened it. The hospital's insurance carrier, the one that had dropped coverage yesterday, had apparently reconsidered. They were offering a settlement, not to Claire specifically, to all 22 women in the class action, $7 million total, to be split evenly, plus a written apology and an agreement to never seek employment in healthcare again. Never seek employment in healthcare again. Claire read that line 3 times. Her phone rang. Marsh again. Did you see it? I'm looking at it now. That's $300,000 per person. Life-changing money for some of them, but that clause is designed to silence us. Yes. We say no. Some of them might not say no, Claire. $300,000 is a lot of money, especially for women who've been out of work for years. Claire closed her laptop. Then they say yes, and we keep fighting. We? However many of us are left. Marsh was quiet for a moment. You're going to lose people. You know that. I know. And you're okay with it. I have to be. She hung up, stared at her coffee. Then she opened her laptop again and sent an email to all 21 other women in the suit. They're trying to buy us out. Not with money, with silence. They want us to take a settlement and promise never to work in medicine again, to disappear, to let them pretend this never happened. I'm voting no. Not because $300,000 isn't real money, but because they don't get to decide if I'm done fighting. You do what you need to do, no judgment. But I'm seeing this through. She hit send. By that evening, 17 women had responded. 14 voted no. 3 were still thinking about it. By the next morning, it was 16-6. By the end of the week, 12 women remained in the lawsuit. 10 had taken the settlement. Claire couldn't blame them. She didn't want to blame them. But she felt it anyway, the sting of abandonment, the knowledge that the fight had gotten too hard, and they'd chosen survival over justice. Maria Salazar stayed. So did Jessica Lynn and Sarah Brennan. 9 others whose stories were too raw, too unfinished to walk away from. 12 is enough, Patricia told them at the next meeting. 12 is still a class. We move forward. The defense filed a motion to dismiss. Patricia fought it and won. They filed a motion to separate the cases. to force each woman to sue individually. Patricia fought that too, won again. Discovery began. Boxes and boxes of documents, depositions that lasted hours. Claire sat across from defense attorneys who asked her about every patient she'd ever lost, every mistake she'd ever made, every rough night when she'd snapped at a coworker or charted too slowly or forgotten to initial a form. They asked about Kandahar, about the IED that had given her the shoulder injury, about the nightmares she'd listed on her VA disability claim, about the medications she'd been prescribed and stopped taking because they made her feel like she was underwater. Ms. Whitmore, is it true you were treated for post-traumatic stress? Yes. And that treatment included antipsychotic medication? For sleep, not psychosis. But you did take antipsychotics. I took Seroquel, low dose, for 4 months, then I stopped. Why did you stop? Because I didn't need it anymore. Or because it made you unstable? Patricia objected. The deposition went on. They asked about her brother, about the money she'd been sending him, about whether she'd been desperate enough to fabricate an assault claim for a settlement. Ms. Whitmore, you've admitted you almost signed the hospital's initial offer. Why didn't you? Because someone told me they were going to bury the truth. Someone you'd never met before. A stranger who called you out of the blue. Yes, and you trusted him. He had evidence, or so he claimed. Claire looked the attorney in the eye. He had video footage of your client assaulting me. That's not a claim. That's a fact. The attorney smiled like she'd said something useful. Nothing further. The depositions took 6 weeks. By the time they finished, it was January. The trial was set for March. And then, 3 days before jury selection, the defense made one final offer, $15 million, split 12 ways. No gag order, no clause about future employment, just money and a settlement that admitted no wrongdoing but agreed to never fight in court. Patricia called an emergency meeting. The 12 women sat around the conference table. Some looked relieved, some looked exhausted. Maria was crying quietly. This is a good offer, Patricia said. Better than we'd get at trial, honestly. The evidence is strong, but juries are unpredictable. This is guaranteed money, real compensation. But no admission of guilt, Jessica said. No, they'll never admit guilt. That's not how this works. So Hale goes to prison, but the system that protected him gets to walk away. The system is broken, Jessica. We can't fix it with one lawsuit. The room was quiet. Claire looked around the table. At 12 women who'd lost jobs and careers and pieces of themselves, at faces that looked older than they should, at hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I want to hear from everyone, she said. One at a time. What do you want to do? They went around the table. 7 wanted to settle. 5 wanted to fight. Claire was the tiebreaker. She thought about her brother in Oregon, about the mortgage on her apartment, about Dennis and his vet bills, and the fact that $300,000 would mean she'd never have to worry about money again. She thought about the Marine in the ICU, about Marcus with the dog bite, about the 14 women who'd taken the earlier settlement and disappeared. She thought about standing in a federal courthouse and making Victor Hale look at her while a jury decided his fate. We fight, she said. The room erupted. Arguments, tears, someone's chair scraping back hard enough to hit the wall. Patricia held up her hands. Okay, we'll put it to a vote. Majority rules. All in favor of settling? 7 hands went up. All in favor of trial? 5 hands. Claire stared at her own hand, still flat on the table. Then slowly she raised it. 6, Patricia said. We have a tie. The woman next to Claire, a nurse named Amanda, who'd worked pediatrics, stood up. Then I'm changing my vote. We fight. Another woman stood. Then another. When it was over, 9 women had voted to go to trial. 3 took the settlement and left the lawsuit that night. 9 remained. Patricia looked at Claire. You're sure about this? Yes. Because if we lose, we won't lose. You can't know that. Claire met her eyes. Yes, I can. The trial started on March 14th. The courtroom was packed. Press in the back rows, victims' families, hospital staff who'd quit rather than stay silent. Colonel Morrison in his dress uniform. Marsh in the same black suit he'd been wearing the night he recorded everything. The jury was seated. 8 women, 4 men, ages ranging from 26 to 71. Opening statements began. The defense went first. They painted Claire as unstable, vengeful, financially motivated. They showed her VA records, her discharge papers. They brought in an expert witness who testified that PTSD could cause false memories. Patricia's cross-examination destroyed him in 14 minutes. Then it was the prosecution's turn. Patricia stood, walked to the center of the courtroom, and played the video. All 47 seconds, 4 angles, perfect clarity. The jury watched in silence. When it ended, Patricia turned to them and said, "That's Claire Whitmore, combat veteran, Bronze Star recipient, field medic who saved lives while under fire. And that's Dr. Victor Hale, chief of surgery, putting his hands on her like she's trash." She let that sit. The defense will tell you this was a moment of stress, that Dr. Hale was overwhelmed, that Ms. Whitmore provoked him. Watch the video again. Watch how he approaches. Watch how he waits. Watch how he chooses his moment. She played it again. The jury watched. This wasn't stress. This was power. And this was a pattern. Over the next 2 weeks, all 9 women testified. Each told their story. Each showed their scars, literal and otherwise. The defense tried to break them, failed. On March 29th, closing arguments concluded. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the foreperson was a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain. She stood, looked at the judge, and read the verdict. In the matter of Whitmore versus St. Adelaide Medical Center, we find in favor of the plaintiffs. The courtroom exploded. The judge banged her gavel. The jury wasn't finished. We award compensatory damages in the amount of $4.2 million to be split among the 9 plaintiffs. We award punitive damages in the amount of $41 million to be paid by the individual defendants. 41 million. Claire sat very still. Around her, people were crying, cheering, embracing. Maria grabbed her hand and squeezed hard enough to hurt. Patricia was shaking her head in disbelief. The judge banged her gavel again. "Order, we're not done." The foreperson continued. "Furthermore, we recommend that the court forward our findings to the State Medical Board for review of licenses held by all defendants and their supervisors during the relevant time period." Translation: everyone who knew and did nothing was about to lose their ability to practice medicine. The judge thanked the jury, dismissed them, set a date for the formal entry of judgment. Outside the courthouse, the scene was chaos. Reporters shouting questions, cameras everywhere, people Claire had never met trying to hug her. She pushed through it all and found a quiet corner near the parking garage. Marsh found her there 10 minutes later. "You did it." "We did it." "No." He shook his head. "This was you. All of it." Claire looked back at the courthouse, at the crowd still celebrating, at the 9 women who'd stayed when everyone else had left. "What happens now?" "Now," Marsh smiled. "Now they appeal. And we fight them again. And we win again. And eventually, maybe 2 years from now, you'll actually see that money." And Hale? Sentencing is next week. With the federal charges plus the civil verdict, he's done. 25 to life, probably. He'll die in prison. Claire thought about that. About Victor Hale in an orange jumpsuit, about doors locking behind him. About the rest of his life spent in a cell no bigger than the exam rooms where he'd assaulted women for 12 years. "Good," she said. Her phone buzzed. A text from Colonel Morrison. "The medal ceremony is tomorrow, 1400 hours. Pentagon. You should come." She stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed, "I'll be there." The next afternoon, Claire Whitmore stood in dress blues she hadn't worn in 4 years, in a room full of people who'd spent their lives in uniform and received the Soldier's Medal for her actions during the convoy accident. The citation read, "For heroism not involving actual conflict with an enemy. Staff Sergeant Claire Whitmore distinguished herself by exceptionally valorous action in rendering life-saving medical care under hazardous conditions." They pinned it next to her Bronze Star. The room applauded. And for the first time in 4 years, Claire Whitmore felt like a soldier again. The cameras were waiting when she walked out. She'd known they would be. She stopped, looked directly at the nearest lens, and said, "My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm a nurse. I'm a veteran, and I'm not going anywhere." Then she walked away. That night, alone in her apartment with Dennis purring on her chest, She got one final text. From Marsh. No words. Just a link. She opened it. It was a news article. The headline read, Massachusetts Attorney General announces criminal investigation into 3 more hospitals following St. Adelaide scandal. Below it, a quote. We are committed to rooting out systemic abuse wherever it exists. No institution is above the law. Claire smiled, set down her phone, and slept. The morning after the Pentagon ceremony, Claire woke to find her phone had died sometime during the night. She plugged it in and watched the screen light up with notifications. 117 unread messages, 34 missed calls, and one voicemail that made her stomach turn over when she saw the number. Tyler. Her brother. She pressed play. Claire. His voice sounded weaker than the last time they'd spoken. Raspier. I saw you on the news, the trial, the medal, all of it. A long pause, the sound of him trying to catch his breath. I'm proud of you. I know I don't say it enough, but I am. Call me when you can. She called him back immediately. It rang 4 times before he picked up. Hey. Tyler, how are you feeling? Like garbage, honestly. But that's not new. He coughed, a wet sound that Claire had learned to hate. Listen, I need to tell you something. The hospital here called. The treatment's working, not cured, not even close, but the tumors are shrinking. They're giving me another 6 months, maybe a year. Claire closed her eyes. That's good. That's really good. It's because of you. The money you've been sending. I know you've been working yourself to death to pay for this. Tyler, let me finish. I saw what that settlement was. 4.2 million split 9 ways. That's almost $500,000 for you. You don't need to keep killing yourself for me anymore. I was never killing myself for you. I was doing my job. Your job nearly got you killed, multiple times from what I saw on TV. Claire didn't argue because he wasn't wrong. She looked at Dennis, who was sitting in a patch of sunlight and grooming his left paw with intense concentration. The money's going to take a while to come through. Appeals, legal fees, all of it. Could be 2 years. I've got time now, thanks to you. Tyler was quiet for a moment. Claire, what are you going to do? After all this? I don't know yet. You should rest. Take a break. Travel somewhere warm. Maybe. But she knew she wouldn't. Resting had never been something she was good at. They talked for another 20 minutes, carefully avoiding the things they couldn't say. How scared they both were. How much time they'd wasted being angry at each other after their parents died. How Tyler's wife had left him 6 months into the diagnosis because she couldn't handle watching him die. When they finally hung up, Claire sat on her couch for a long time, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Renata. Coffee? I have news. They met at a cafe 3 blocks from Claire's apartment, one of those places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs and baristas who took their latte art very seriously. Renata was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. You look terrible, Renata said when Claire sat down. Good morning to you too. I mean it. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours? Claire picked up the coffee. What's the news? Renata pulled out her phone and showed Claire an email. It was from Harbor Medical Center, a mid-sized hospital 20 miles south of Beacon Harbor. The subject line read, Employment Opportunity. They're rebuilding, Renata said. After St. Adelaide collapsed, 3 other hospitals in the region got investigated. Harbor was one of them. They cleaned house, fired their whole administrative team, brought in new leadership, implemented new policies, and they want to hire nurses who've proven they won't tolerate that kind of environment. They want to hire me. They want to hire both of us. Charge nurse positions, better pay than St. Adelaide, better benefits, actual oversight. Renata leaned forward. Claire, this could be good. A fresh start. Claire read the email. The offer was generous. Almost suspiciously generous. Why us specifically? Because we're famous now. Because hiring the nurses from the St. Adelaide case sends a message. They're serious about reform. Renata paused. Or they're using us for PR. Hard to say. You think it's worth the risk? I think we're good at what we do, and I think people still need nurses, even if the system's broken. Renata took a sip of her coffee. But it's your call. You've earned the right to walk away from all this. Claire thought about that, about walking away, about using her settlement money to move somewhere quiet, somewhere she could sleep without nightmares and live without constantly looking over her shoulder. About being done. I'll think about it. Fair enough. Renata stood up. I'm taking the job. Start dates in 2 weeks. If you want in, let me know. She left. Claire sat alone with her coffee and watched people walk past the windows. Normal people doing normal things. A woman with a stroller. A man in a suit checking his phone. 2 teenagers sharing headphones. Nobody who knew her face from television or Twitter or whatever hashtag was trending. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Senator Vance's office, confirming her testimony date. 3 weeks from now. Washington. She'd be the opening witness in a hearing on systemic abuse in healthcare. The message included a draft of the questions they planned to ask. Claire read through them, her stomach tightening with each one. They were fair questions. Necessary questions. But answering them meant reliving every moment of the past 5 months in front of cameras and senators and the entire country. She closed the email without responding. That afternoon, she drove to the ruins of St. Adelaide. The building was gone now, demolished 2 weeks after the fire. All that remained was a concrete foundation and some scattered debris that the cleanup crew had missed. The fence around the perimeter was covered in flowers and notes and photos, a makeshift memorial to something that had been both terrible and necessary. Claire walked along the fence, reading the notes. Thank you for fighting. You saved my sister. Because of you, I reported my boss. You made me brave. She stopped at a photo of someone she recognized, the elderly man in the wheelchair from the 3rd floor. Someone had written beneath it, Mr. Richard Torres, rescued from the fire by Claire Whitmore, died peacefully 2 weeks later, surrounded by family. She stood there for a long time, looking at his face. You were there that night. Claire turned. A woman stood behind her, maybe 60, with gray hair and kind eyes. She held a bouquet of daisies. I was. I'm Richard's daughter, Elena. She stepped forward and tucked the flowers into the fence. They told me what you did. Going back in. Carrying him down. You gave us 2 more weeks with him. 2 weeks to say goodbye. I'm sorry he didn't make it longer. Don't be. He was 87, he'd been sick for years. But those last 2 weeks, her voice caught. He was awake. He was himself. We got to tell him we loved him. Because you gave us time. Claire didn't know what to say to that. Elena pulled an envelope from her purse. He wrote you a letter before he died. He wanted you to have it. She handed Claire the envelope and walked away before Claire could thank her. Claire didn't open it. Not there. She drove home, fed Dennis, made tea, and sat at her kitchen table with the envelope in front of her for 20 minutes before she finally tore it open. The handwriting was shaky but legible. Dear Claire, I don't know if you remember me. I was the old man in the wheelchair on the 3rd floor. You came back for me when everyone else had evacuated. You pulled me to safety. I want you to know something. I spent 40 years as a physician. I saw the best and worst of medicine. I saw people like you, people who do the right thing even when it's hard, even when nobody's watching. And I saw people like the ones who ran that hospital, people who forgot why we do this work. You reminded me. In those last moments, when you came back through the smoke, you reminded me what it means to serve. I'm dying. The cancer's won, but I'm dying with dignity because you gave me those extra days, because you didn't leave me behind. Don't let them break you. Don't let this fight make you bitter. You're too good for that. Thank you. Richard Torres, MD. Claire read it 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it in the drawer where she kept important things. Her discharge papers, her Bronze Star citation, the photo of her parents from before the accident. She thought about what Dr. Torres had written, about not letting the fight make her bitter. She thought about the last 5 months, about the assault and the lawsuit and the fire and the trial, about the women who'd stayed and the women who'd left, about Victor Hale in prison and the administrators facing charges in the 3 hospitals under investigation. She thought about whether she was bitter. Maybe, a little. But underneath the bitterness was something else, something that felt like purpose. Her phone rang. Marsh. Have you decided about the Senate testimony? How did you know I was deciding? Because you haven't confirmed yet, and you're not someone who procrastinates. You're stuck. He wasn't wrong. I don't know if I have anything left to say, Claire admitted. We won the trial. Hale's in prison. The hospitals are being investigated. What more can I add? Context. You can add context. Marsh was quiet for a moment. Claire, there are women across the country watching what happened to you. Women who are dealing with their own hails, their own corrupt systems. They're waiting to see if fighting back is worth it, if speaking up changes anything. It didn't change anything for the 10 women who took settlements and left. It changed everything for the 9 who stayed, for the 100 who filed complaints since your trial, for the senators who are finally paying attention. He paused. You think this is over? It's not. It's just starting. Claire looked at the letter from Dr. Torres still sitting on her table. Okay, I'll testify. Good. I'll let them know. After he hung up, Claire opened her laptop and started writing. Not testimony, not yet. Just thoughts, observations, things she'd learned. Nobody should have to fight this hard to be heard. Nobody should have to risk everything just to be believed. But until the system changes, some of us will have to. Not because we're heroes, because we're the ones who couldn't walk away. She wrote for 2 hours. When she finished, she had 7 pages. She sent them to Senator Vance's office with a note. This is what I want to say. Use what you need. 3 days later, she got a call from the senator herself. Ms. Whitmore, I read your testimony. It's powerful. It's exactly what we need. A pause. But I want to ask you something. After you testify, after this is all over, what then? What do you want? Claire thought about Renata's job offer, about Harbor Medical Center and its new policies and its promises of reform, about whether she trusted those promises or whether she was just tired of fighting. I want to work, she said finally. I want to take care of patients. I want to do the job I trained for without looking over my shoulder. You've earned that. Have I? Yes, but I don't think you believe it yet. The senator was right. Claire didn't believe it. She'd spent so long fighting that she'd forgotten what it felt like to just exist without armor. I'm working on it, Claire said. The day before her testimony, Claire drove to Boston. She checked into a hotel near the Capitol, ordered room service she barely touched, and tried to sleep. It didn't work. At 2 a.m., she gave up and turned on the television. The news was covering tomorrow's hearing. They had photos of her, of the other 8 women who'd stayed in the lawsuit, of Victor Hale being led into court in shackles. They had interviews with medical experts and legal analysts and victims' advocates, all of them discussing what this case meant for healthcare reform. Claire turned it off. At 8 a.m., she put on the same suit she'd worn to trial. At 8:45, a car picked her up. At 9:30, she was sitting in a waiting room outside the Senate hearing chamber, listening to her own heartbeat in her ears. Maria Salazar was there. So was Jessica Lynn and Sarah Brennan, the 9 women who'd fought. They'd all been asked to testify, though Claire would go first. You ready? Maria asked. No. Good. Neither am I. At 10 a.m., they were called in. The chamber was enormous, with senators arranged in a semicircle and cameras positioned at every angle. The gallery was full. Press in the back. Advocates in the middle. Marsh sitting 3 rows from the front in his black suit. Claire sat at the witness table. A microphone was positioned in front of her. Senator Vance sat directly across, flanked by 4 other committee members. Ms. Whitmore, thank you for being here. Please raise your right hand. Claire raised her hand. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. You may be seated. Let's begin. For the next 90 minutes, Claire told her story. She answered every question clearly, directly, without emotion. She described the assault, the cover-up, the lawsuit, the trial. She explained how the system had protected Hale for years and how it took federal intervention to break that protection. Then Senator Vance asked the question Claire had been dreading. Miss Whitmore, you saved Dr. Hale's life after his suicide attempt. Why? The chamber went completely silent. Claire looked at the senators, at the cameras, at the 9 women sitting behind her. Because that's the job, she said. When someone is dying in front of you, you save them. Even if they hurt you, even if you hate them, you save them because that's what medical professionals do. That's the oath. Some would argue he didn't deserve saving. Maybe not, but I deserve to be the kind of person who saves people anyway. Claire leaned forward. What happened to me wasn't about one man. It was about a system that protected him, and I couldn't let that system turn me into someone who lets people die, even people who deserve it, because then They win. Senator Vance nodded slowly. What would you say to other women facing similar situations? Claire thought about that. About the women who'd taken settlements and disappeared. About the ones who'd stayed. About the 100 who'd filed complaints since the trial. I'd say it's going to be hard. Harder than you think. They'll come after everything. Your credibility, your mental health, your personal life. They'll try to make you small. They'll offer you money to disappear. She paused. And if you take it, I understand. I almost took it. But if you don't, if you decide to fight, know that you're not alone. There are people who will stand with you, and it matters. What you do matters. Thank you, Ms. Whitmore. That's all the questions I have. The hearing continued. Maria testified, then Jessica, then the others. By the time they finished, it was after 4 p.m. The committee thanked them, promised action, and adjourned. Outside, the press was waiting. Claire pushed through without stopping, ignoring shouted questions until she found a quiet corner near the parking garage. Marsh found her there. You did good. Did I? Yeah, you did. Claire leaned against the wall. What happens now? After all this? After the testimony and the appeals and everything else? You live your life, whatever that looks like. I don't know what that looks like anymore. Then figure it out. Marsh handed her a business card. If you ever need anything, anything at all, call me. She took the card. Why did you do all this? Really? Because my sister couldn't fight, and someone needed to. He walked away. Claire stood alone in the parking garage, holding his card, and for the first time since this whole thing started, she let herself cry. Not from sadness, not from relief. From something she couldn't name. Release, maybe. Or just exhaustion. When she was done, she wiped her face, walked to her car, and drove home. 2 weeks later, Claire Whitmore started her first shift at Harbor Medical Center. The building was smaller than St. Adelaide, newer, with windows that actually opened and a staff break room that had a functional coffee maker. Renata met her at the entrance. Ready? Getting there. They walked in together. The ER was busy, but not chaotic. Claire checked in with the charge nurse, a man in his 50s named David, who shook her hand and said, "We're glad you're here." "Thanks. Fair warning, everyone knows who you are. Some will treat you like a celebrity. Some will resent you for it. Try not to let either one get to you." Noted. Her first patient was a 6-year-old with a broken arm from falling off a swing. Claire set the fracture, applied the cast, and let the girl pick the color, pink with glitter. Her second patient was an elderly woman with chest pain. Claire ran the EKG, called cardiology, got her admitted. Clean, efficient, no drama. By hour 4, she'd fallen into the rhythm of it. The controlled chaos. The constant decisions. The feeling of being useful. At hour 8, a man came in with a stab wound to the abdomen. Gang violence, probably, though he wouldn't say. Claire gloved up, helped the attending surgeon control the bleeding, and assisted with the emergency laparotomy. They saved him. Barely. When it was over, Claire stripped off her gown and walked to the break room. Renata was there, eating a sandwich. "How's it going?" "Good, I think." "You think?" Claire sat down. "I forgot what it was like to just work, without waiting for the other shoe to drop." "You'll remember, takes time." 2 months passed. Claire worked, slept, worked again. She testified one more time, this time in front of a state legislative committee considering new health care protections. She went to physical therapy for her shoulder, which had been bothering her since the fire. She visited Tyler in Oregon and spent a week helping him organize his medical records. She didn't take a vacation. She didn't know how. On a Tuesday in late June, Claire's phone rang during her lunch break. Unknown number. "Miss Whitmore, this is Judge Patricia Hammond. I presided over your case." Claire sat up straighter. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm calling because the appeals process is complete. The defendants have exhausted their options. The verdict stands. The settlement funds will be dispersed within 30 days. Claire's hand tightened on the phone. "All of it?" "All of it. $4.2 million in compensatory damages, split 9 ways, $41 million in punitive damages, which will be collected from the personal assets of the defendants and distributed according to the court's order." The judge paused. "You won, Ms. Whitmore. Completely and finally. Congratulations." "Thank you." After she hung up, Claire sat in the break room for a long time, staring at her phone. $460,000. After legal fees and taxes, probably $300,000. Enough to pay off her mortgage, enough to cover Tyler's treatment for years, enough to never worry about money again. She called Tyler first. "It's done. The money's coming through." "How much?" "Enough." He was quiet for a moment. "Claire, take some of it for yourself. Do something nice. You've earned it." "I will." She didn't know if that was true. That night, she drove to the ocean. There was a beach 30 miles north of Beacon Harbor where she used to go sometimes when she needed to think. She parked in the empty lot, walked down to the water, and stood there watching the waves come in. Her phone buzzed. A text from Maria Salazar. "Did you hear? The judge called me too. We won. Actually won. Thank you for not giving up." Then another text. Jessica Lynn. Then Sarah. Then all 9 women, one by one, thanking her for fighting when they'd wanted to quit. Claire read every message, responded to each one. When she was done, she put her phone in her pocket and walked along the shoreline until her shoes were soaked and the sun was setting over the water. She thought about Richard Torres and his letter, about not letting the fight make her bitter. She thought about the Marine in the ICU and Marcus with the dog bite and the young man on the ventilator who'd survived because she'd bagged him down 4 flights of stairs. She thought about the oath she'd taken when she became a nurse, to do no harm, to serve, to show up even when it hurt. And she thought about what came next, not rest. She didn't want rest. But maybe something that looked like peace. Maybe a life where she could do her job without wondering if someone was going to grab her by the hair. Maybe relationships with people who didn't know her story. Maybe a future that wasn't defined by what she'd survived. Maybe. Her phone rang. "Renata. Where are you?" "The beach. Get back here. We're celebrating. Maria and Jessica are driving up. We rented out the back room at Donovan's. You're the guest of honor." "Ren, I don't, not optional. Be there in an hour." She hung up before Claire could argue. Claire stood on the beach for another 5 minutes, watching the last of the sunset fade. Then she got in her car and drove back to Beacon Harbor. Donovan's was a dive bar 3 blocks from Harbor Medical Center, the kind of place with sticky floors and a jukebox that only played classic rock. The back room was small, but packed, not just the 9 women from the lawsuit, but others too. Nurses from Harbor, Miguel from St. Adelaide's Security, Kyle the resident, the corporal from the convoy accident, now stateside and recovering. Someone had brought a cake. Someone else had brought champagne that was slightly too warm. Renata made a toast about persistence and justice, and not letting anyone tell you to shut up and take it. Maria hugged Claire hard enough to crack ribs. "We did it. We actually did it." "Yeah, we did." The party went until midnight. Claire drank 1 glass of champagne and switched to water. She talked to people whose names she half remembered and listened to stories about their own fights, their own hails, their own moments of deciding whether to speak up or stay quiet. At 11:47, she stepped outside for air. Marsh was leaning against the building, smoking a cigarette. "Didn't know you smoked," Claire said. "I don't. Quit 12 years ago, started again last month." He took a drag. "Stress." "What are you stressed about?" "We won." "That's what I'm stressed about. Now I have to figure out what to do next." He looked at her. "You ever think about what you'd do if you weren't fighting?" "Every day." "And?" "I haven't figured it out yet." Marsh smiled. "Let me know when you do." He stubbed out the cigarette and went back inside. Claire stayed outside for a few more minutes, watching cars pass on the street, listening to the muffled sound of music from inside the bar. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Colonel Morrison. I wanted to let you know that the convoy Marine, Jackson, made a full recovery. He's back on active duty. He asked me to tell you thank you." Claire stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back, "Tell him he's welcome, and tell him to be careful." She went back inside. The party was winding down. People were saying their goodbyes, exchanging numbers, making promises to stay in touch. Claire knew some of them would. Most wouldn't. That was okay. Maria caught her at the door. "What are you going to do with your settlement money?" "Haven't decided yet. Maybe travel." "You should. You've earned it." Maria paused. "Claire, I need you to know something. What you did, fighting when the rest of us were ready to quit, It changed my life. I got a job, a good one, at a hospital that actually cares about staff safety. I'm starting next month. That's great. It's because of you, because you showed us it was possible to fight and win. Claire didn't know what to say to that. Don't disappear, Maria said. Okay? Stay in touch. I will. She drove home. Dennis was waiting by the door, meowing indignantly about dinner being late. She fed him, changed into comfortable clothes, and sat on her couch with a cup of tea she'd made and forgotten to drink. The apartment was quiet. Outside, Beacon Harbor was settling into late-night stillness. The occasional car passing, a dog barking in the distance. Normal sounds, safe sounds. Claire picked up her phone and opened her email. There was one from Senator Vance's office, thanking her again for her testimony and informing her that new legislation had been introduced based on the hearings. The Healthcare Worker Protection Act. It would require independent investigations of workplace assault claims and impose federal penalties on institutions that retaliated against complainants. It probably wouldn't pass. Too much opposition, too many hospitals lobbying against it. But maybe. Maybe it would. She opened another email. This one from Harbor Medical Center. A patient satisfaction survey about her first 2 months. She scanned it quickly. Someone had written, Nurse Whitmore was professional, kind, and clearly very skilled. She made my daughter feel safe during a scary time. Claire saved that email. She opened her calendar. Looked at the next 6 months, work shifts, follow-up appointments. A deposition for one of the 3 hospitals still under investigation. They wanted her as an expert witness. And in December, a date marked simply, Tyler's birthday. Oregon. Her life. Not perfect, not healed, but hers. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from Renata. First shift together tomorrow. Oh, 600. Don't be late. Claire smiled. She set her alarm for 5 a.m., turned off the lights, and went to bed. And for the first time in 6 months, she slept through the night without waking once. The next morning, Claire Whitmore walked into Harbor Medical Center at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes early. She clocked in, grabbed her assignment sheet, and started her shift. Her first patient was a construction worker with a nail through his hand. Claire removed it, cleaned the wound, and sent him home with antibiotics and instructions to take 3 days off work. Her second patient was a teenager with an asthma attack. Claire administered a nebulizer treatment, monitored her oxygen levels, and called her parents to pick her up. At 9:15 a.m., during a rare quiet moment, Claire stepped outside to the ambulance bay. The morning was cool, the sky clear. She could see the harbor from here, boats moving in and out, people starting their days. Renata joined her. You good? Yeah, I'm good. You mean it this time? Claire thought about that, about the last 6 months, about the assault and the fire and the trial and everything that had come after, about Victor Hale in prison and the administrators facing charges and the hospitals scrambling to reform before they became the next headline, about Richard Torres and his letter, about the Marine who'd made a full recovery, about Marcus with the dog bite and the young man on the ventilator and the elderly man in the wheelchair, about the 9 women who'd stayed when everyone else left, about the life she was building, one shift at a time, in a hospital that might actually keep its promises. Yeah, she said, I mean it. They went back inside, and Claire Whitmore did what she'd always done, what she'd been trained to do, what she'd fought for the right to keep doing. She saved lives. Not because she was a hero, not because she wanted recognition, not because it was easy or safe or would ever stop hurting, because it was the job, and she was good at it, and nobody was going to take that away from her again.